Chapter 2075. As Gong Jie ate, his eyes scanned the dining table. Suddenly, his gaze landed on a plate of fragrant red braised pork. Yin Shishir saw that he was staring at the red braised pork, so she diligently picked up a piece of meat and brought it to his mouth. Gong Jie took a bite and tasted it contentedly. The delicious taste made his soul feel like it had been sublimated. He was happy, but the other two little guys were a little gloomy, especially Muyaja. At this moment, he was like a child who had been neglected. He placed his chopsticks on the table in a fit of pique and looked at Yin Shishir with displeasure. Didn't this woman think that she was being a little biased? This man had hands and feet. He was an adult, so why did he still need someone to feed him? He was like a 5-year-old child. He suddenly felt a little unbalanced. She was clearly his woman, but she gave others the feeling that she and Gong Jie were showing off their affection. He was embarrassed. Yu, who was standing beside him, also felt a little apprehensive. Mommy had rarely fed him all his life, especially him, who matured very early. He knew how to eat by himself when he was 3 years old. He never needed anyone to supervise him or carefully feed him. This Gong Jie, on the other hand, sat there like a big boss. He rarely touched his chopsticks. Yin Shishir was feeding him gently. This intimate action undoubtedly stung the eyes of the father and sons beside them, especially Xiao Chen, who was the most displeased. Even Mommy had never fed him before. Now, he could only watch helplessly as Gong Jie enjoyed such VIP treatment. He couldn't help but feel a little dejected. He and Yu looked at each other and suddenly put down their chopsticks. The two little guys walked over to Yin Shishir, one on each side, and gently tugged at her sleeves. Yin Shishir turned her head. Just as she was feeling puzzled, she saw the two little guys sandwiching her in the middle. At the same time, they raised their palm-sized faces, opened their mouths wide, and made greedy sounds. Yu opened her mouth and looked at her expectantly, like a little swallow waiting to be fed by an old swallow. She opened her mouth and looked extremely eager. Xiao Chen opened his mouth as well. He said softly and cutely. He sounded like he was acting coquettishly, as if he was waiting for her to pamper him. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "What are you doing? I want Mommy to feed me too." Xiao Chen acted coquettishly and stared at her with his watery eyes. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She held back her laughter and rebuked. "Go back to your seat and pick it up yourself. Mommy is biased." Yu complained pitifully, as if she had done something evil. "You feed Uncle, but you don't feed us." "Biased?" Muichin nodded as well. "That's right. The meat fed by Mommy was more fragrant." "Mommy, hey." They were actually throwing a tantrum. Yin Shishir was helpless, but she couldn't do anything about the two of them. She could only pick up a piece of meat for each of them and stuff it into their mouths. The two little guys chewed with their mouths full and narrowed their eyes as they snickered. Even though they had gotten their way, they couldn't bear to leave and seemed to want to cling on to her. Yu and Xiao Chen were secretly competing with each other as they chewed with all their might. Xiao Chen swallowed first, opened his mouth again, and looked at her. It was obvious that he wanted her to feed him. Was he asking for her affection? Chapter 2076. The moment Yin Shishir saw him acting coquettishly and pestering her to feed him, she immediately understood what was going on. This little fellow was jealous. He must have been jealous when he saw her feeding Gong Jie so intimately. Hence, he pestered her to experience the privilege of being fed. Naturally, she knew what her own child was thinking. Moreover, Yu had always been an obedient and sensible child. He would always hold his own bowl and put food in his own bowl. He was very independent. At this moment, he was probably envious of the Gong Jie. What about Muichin? He was purely following behind Yu to join in the fun. Yin Shishir was almost blushing from how adorable the two little fellows were. Seeing that she was not moving, Muichin tugged at her sleeve pitifully and urged her eagerly. He started to act coquettishly in a soft voice. "Mommy, hey." Yin Shishir could not resist the two little fellows pestering. She picked up a piece of meat with her chopsticks and put it into Yu's mouth. Only then did the latter feel satisfied. Just as she was about to feed Xiao Chen, Muyaja spoke unhappily. Go back to your seat obediently." As he spoke, Mu Yaja pointed to his seat. He had no one to feed him, yet these two little fellows still wanted to enjoy it. When Muichin heard this, he pursed his lips unhappily. However, he had always obeyed his father's orders and had never disobeyed him. He obediently returned to his seat. "Daddy is a bully," Xiaoichin muttered to Muyaja, obviously unhappy with him. Muyaja's gaze froze. However, Muichin did not dare to say a word. He picked up a piece of food and blinked pitifully before he obediently ate his food. Yu also returned to his seat. He felt unhappy, but after thinking about it, he did enjoy some special treatment. Hence, he felt much better and obediently ate his food. Yun Shir, on the other hand, chuckled softly. She glanced at Muyaja with a pair of smiling eyes. She had a feeling that the man was jealous, too. Otherwise, why would he be so cold and even argue with the children? "Why are you so fierce?" Yin Shir asked, even though she already knew the answer. Muyaja snorted and only said, "Don't spoil these two guys too much. They're already so old. It's not like they don't have the ability to work and can eat by themselves. Why do they need someone to feed them?" There was a hidden meaning in his words. He glanced at Gong Jie coldly from the corner of his eyes. He was probably implying that the man sitting at the table was just like Yu and Xiaoichin. They were still huge babies and needed others to feed them. Gong Jie seemed to be deliberately provoking him. He smiled and said, "Yu and Xiaoichin are still young. When I was 8 years old, my sister still chased after me to feed me." These words were provoking him. Muyaja's gaze turned cold. He glanced at Yun Shir with dissatisfaction. Obviously, he did not believe him. Is what he said true? Yes. Yun Shir smiled and said, "Xiao Jie was especially delicate when he was young. When he was 8 or 9 years old, he still didn't eat by himself, so I usually fed him." Yu was stunned when he heard this. "Uncle, you're so delicate?" Gong Jie curled his lips. Yes. Xiaoichin was so envious. Muyaja's expression did not look good. This Gong Jie was obviously provoking him. He felt very unhappy. Chapter 2077. "Here, I'll feed you. Have some meat." Muyaja turned his face away in disdain. No. At the thought of how she had gently fed Gong Jie meat earlier, Muyaja felt an indescribable sense of awkwardness in his heart. He could not spit it out, nor could he swallow it. It was as if a fishbone was stuck in his throat. He wasn't so delicate that he needed someone to feed him. Ever since he was young, he had been different from other willful children. Ever since he was 3 years old, he had learned how to use a spoon to eat obediently while sitting on a high stool. He didn't need anyone to coax him or lie to him. He didn't make a fuss. He ate quietly and obediently. Normally, children of this age would need adults to carry them in their arms and coax them while feeding them. But he didn't. He had liked to be independent since he was young. He liked to rely on himself for everything. This trait was inherited from Xiaoichin. The children of the Mu family had always been mature and agile. It wasn't enough. Looking at how intimate Yin Shir and Gong Jie were, he felt that this scene was an eyesore. Gong Jie laughed and teased, "Sister, look at brother-in-law. Is he jealous?" Yin Shir raised her eyebrows and glanced at Muyaja. Jealous? I'm not happy to see you feed me. Are you serious?" Yin Shir smiled. "Our man probably won't be jealous over such a trivial matter." Muyaja glared at her and glanced at Gong Jie coldly from the corner of his eyes. He snorted coldly, but the meaning behind it was inexplicable. Gong Jie's thin lips curved into a smile. Suddenly, he scooped up a piece of meat with a spoon and brought it to Muyaja's mouth with a smile. He coaxed, "Brother-in-law, come on. I'll feed you some meat." "Get lost." Muyaja glared at him and turned his face away in disdain. However, how could Gong Jie allow him to refuse? She didn't even bother to look at his expression and directly shoved the spoonful into his mouth. Yin Shir. Yu and Xiaoichin were also dumbfounded. Oh my god! Muyaja did not expect Gong Jie to make such a bold move. He frowned coldly and looked up to see Gong Jie's extremely kind smile, especially the mischievous expression on his face. His eyes contained a hint of provocation. He was extremely two-faced. Brother-in-law, is it delicious? Gong Jie was smiling on the surface, but the curvature of his lips was a fake smile. It was just the movement of his muscles, and the smile did not reach his eyes. Mu Yaja took a bite of the meat expressionlessly and chewed viciously, as if what he was chewing was not ordinary beef, but real Gong Jie. The two men, one with a smile on his face and the other with a cold expression, looked at each other. The air was filled with sparks of electricity. "Thank you, brother-in-law." Gong Jie smiled casually. "You're welcome, brother-in-law." The air was suddenly silent. The atmosphere instantly turned cold. Gong Jie and Mu Yaja, one with fire and one with ice, separated the world into two extremes. Yin Shishir was sandwiched in the middle. She felt as if she was in the realm of fire and water. She was so nervous that her heart was on tenterhooks. She was afraid that these two tall and strong men would quarrel at the dining table. In fact, it was not impossible. Chapter 2078. She heaved a sigh of relief. She put a piece of meat into each of their bowls and urged them, Okay, let's eat. It's not the first time you've met, so don't be so polite." She diligently poured a bowl of soup for Mu Yaja as she spoke. Mu Yaja's expression finally looked better. Gong Jie looked around the dining table. Finally, his gaze landed on a delicate-looking plate of diced cheese chicken. He tasted it and found that it tasted pretty good. He exclaimed in admiration, "Yu, your culinary skills are really impressive. To think that I even suspected that you were bragging. Now I take back my words. Just because of your hurtful words, there won't be another meal after this one." Yu was implying that he was never going to cook for him again. Gong Jie expressed his grievance and protested. However, Yu smiled elegantly and said, "Your protest is overruled." Yin Shishir noticed that Gong Jie was getting more and more diligent. She secretly observed him and realized that he was more interested in diced cheese chicken. However, this was the first time Yu had made this dish. She wondered if the little guy had invented it or if he had learned another famous dish. Hence, she could not wait to try it. It tasted pretty good. The cheese was extremely fragrant and soft after being cooked. Together with the diced chicken, the aroma overflowed with a single bite. She immediately scooped a spoonful and fed it to Mu Yaja. She encouraged him. "Try it. It tastes pretty good." Mu Yaja had never tried this dish before. He always kept a distance from things that he had never tried before. Although diced cheese chicken looked pretty good, he had never tried it before. Hence, he only cared about eating things that he thought were delicious. Seeing that she was about to feed him, Mu Yaja turned his face to the side with a cold expression. It was a textbook example of its tsundere. Yin Shishir suddenly understood who Yu had inherited his tsundere character from. "Eat. Let's eat." Yin Shishir encouraged him. Her fervent expression was just like the enthusiastic salesman in the department stores. Mu Yaja looked at her and saw the gentleness in her eyes. Only then did the ice on his face break. His eyes were tinged with gentleness. He leaned over and opened his mouth slightly. Unexpectedly, just as he was about to take it, Yin Shishir suddenly retracted her hand and directly put the chicken into her mouth. Mu Yaja was stunned. At the side, Yu and Xiao Yichen burst into laughter. Mommy was purposely teasing Daddy. Teasing Daddy! Yin Shishir smiled. Her mouth was full, but she did not chew. She seemed to be showing off. She raised her eyebrows at Mu Yaja, as if she was silently provoking him. She was just pretending to feed him. When he took the bait and leaned over, she would retract her hand and put it into her mouth. Yin Shishir had gotten her way. Seeing that Mu Yaja was still embarrassed, she raised her eyebrows arrogantly. However, Mu Yaja suddenly narrowed his eyes and the corners of his lips turned up slightly. There was a mischievous arc in his eyes. Yin Shishir suddenly had a bad feeling. She felt that this man was up to no good again. Before she could react, Mu Yaja suddenly leaned over and captured her stuffed mouth. His thin lips sealed hers and sucked on her frozen lips. Chapter 2079. Little Yichen was obviously taken aback by this unexpected scene. He shyly covered his eyes and pretended to avoid it, but subconsciously, he could not help peeking through the gaps between his fingers. Yu's face turned slightly red when she saw this. She turned her head away awkwardly, too embarrassed to look any further. Gong Jie was even more stunned. He stared blankly at Mu Yaja as he slowly withdrew his hand. The corners of his lips twitched involuntarily as he stared in bewilderment. Yin Shishir was still in a state of shock. She sat in her seat in a daze. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she looked at the calm man sitting beside her. It was as if the scene just now was nothing to him. Or perhaps Gong Jie's arrival had caused him to feel repressed for a long time. By releasing himself like this, he could ensure his position in her heart. Secondly, it could be considered as a show of strength to this fellow who had been provoking him all this while. He could show him what it meant to be fed. Muyaja thought somewhat childishly. What kind of feeding was that? This was the real deal. Moreover, he was the only one who could enjoy such treatment. Gong Jie also learned that feeding could be done this way. He had learned something new. This brother-in-law of his was no pushover. How could he use such a method to provoke him? In reality, Gong Jie could tell that Muyaja was deliberately provoking him. He curled his lips and laughed mockingly. Obviously, he didn't take his provocation to heart. He elegantly put his arm around Yin Shishir's shoulder and complained aggrievedly, "Sister, look, brother-in-law is jealous of you and me." Muyaja snorted coldly. However, Yu added, "Uncle, my daddy is a huge vinegar jar. You should keep a distance from my mommy. Daddy used to be jealous of a dog." Gong Jie's expression froze, and his facial muscles twitched. "Huh? What do you mean?" Mommy raised a poodle. In the beginning, when she wasn't busy with work, she held the dog in her arms almost every day. Daddy was jealous and said that if there was a chance, he must kick this stupid dog out. PFFF, Xiaoi Chen covered her mouth and snickered. When she received Gong Jie's incredulous and suspicious gaze, she stretched out her little hand and said, "Yes, I can testify that there is such a thing." Muyaja, on the other hand, drank a mouthful of soup in a serious manner, as if he didn't feel that this was a shameful thing. Instead, he was dignified and had an expression that said, "So what? I'm just jealous." Everyone fell silent. In fact, Xiaoi Chen really wanted to say, what did she mean by Daddy is a super big vinegar jar? You too. You were just as jealous of that dog as Daddy was. You also said that you wanted to kick that dog out of the house. You were the one who said that. And Uncle, you're also a jealous demon, okay? The whole family was like this, and he was the most normal one. After dinner, Gong Jie didn't plan to stay any longer. He still had things to do and had to leave for North America the next day. He needed to make some adjustments today, so he was in a hurry to leave after dinner. Yin Shishir offered to send him off. Muyaja looked displeased. Fortunately, Yu understood and immediately pulled Muyaja and Xiaoi Chen out for a walk. Yin Shishir walked Gong Jie to the door and said with a smile, "Xiao Jie, did you have fun today?" Chapter 2080. Yin Shishir blushed and said, "In the future, you can come and play with me when you're free. I'll bring you around. There are still many fun places to visit." "Forget it. Look at how jealous brother-in-law is. I'm afraid there won't be many opportunities like this in the future. Why bother with him?" Yin Shishir was annoyed. Gong Jie was silent for a moment. Suddenly, he said slowly, "Brother-in-law is a born aristocrat. He should have been born with a golden spoon in his mouth and be loved by everyone." During dinner, he observed this man from a close distance. Even during dinner, his every movement was noble and elegant, just like a gentleman. Only a born aristocrat would be like this. The Gong and Mu families were different. The Gong family was a huge interest group with a vast territory. It was one of the top wealthy families in the world. The Mu family was a century-old aristocrat. Their family had stood tall for 100 years, and their glory had lasted for half a century. This was unprecedented and would not be replicated in the future. Even the change of a dynasty in 100 years was nothing. Moreover, it was not easy for a family to last for 100 years. Probably since he was born, he did not have to worry about food or clothing. The arrogance in his bones was like that of royalty. He was worried that his sister would be wronged if she was with him. However, he had no right to interfere in matters of the heart. There was no leeway. Gong Jie's lips curled into a smile. Suddenly, he grabbed her by the back of her neck and planted a kiss on her forehead. Sister, if brother-in-law bullies you, just give me a call anytime. Yin Shishir was speechless. She was stunned for a moment and laughed. All right, Xiao Jie, don't worry about this. How can I not worry about sister's matters? Yin Shishir was helpless. She felt warm and complicated at Gong Jie's protection. She only urged him, it's late. You should go home. Remember to rest early. Okay. Good night, sister. Gong Jie smiled and got into the car. The car sped off. Yin Shishir watched the car leave and turned to go home. After leaving Shawnee Walk, the Mercedes-Benz drove to the provincial road. Finally, it stopped at a remote place by the roadside. Gong Jie alighted from the car and took out a cigarette box. With a flick of his wrist, a cigarette popped out. He casually held it in his mouth and lit up the cigarette with a lighter. Smoke rose in spirals, and sparks flickered in the dark night. Not long after, a jeep followed closely behind and stopped to the side. After the engine was turned off, there was no movement. With a cigarette in his mouth, Gong Jie slowly stuffed his hands into his trouser pockets and strolled to the side of the car. He lifted his long leg and kicked the car door fiercely. His strength was especially fierce. With just one kick, the car door was slightly dented. Get down here, he ordered coldly, and the car door was immediately pushed open. Then a few well-trained bodyguards came out and stood in a row. Gong Jie sized them up expressionlessly and asked coldly, Who sent you? Everyone was silent, not making a single sound. Answer me. Gong Jie snorted coldly. His gaze was extremely dangerous. You have been following me since the day. Second young master, we are under the orders of the chief to be on standby at any time and to keep an eye on any possible danger around you. This is the chief's order. We are protecting you. Chapter 2081. Are you sure this is protection and not surveillance? To him, this was not protection but surveillance. He did not like the feeling of being watched. The bodyguards' expressions froze. One of them replied obediently, The leader doesn't have any other intentions. He's just worried that you've offended Alman and might be pursued and assassinated. That's why he sent us to guard you. Gong Jie's expression softened slightly. A while ago, he had indeed offended the leader of an arms group. The cause of the incident was that he had ruthlessly taken a large portion of the Middle East market from the hands of the arms group tycoon. Taking away a piece of fat meat had undoubtedly angered him. In the arms market, ecological balance was also very important. Today, although the Hurricane Group was already a dominant company, strictly speaking, there was still a 30% share of the market outside. This was not because the Hurricane Group was not capable enough. In fact, Gong Xiaoying had the ability to take the last share under his name. However, the arms market was quite fertile. This 30% market share already included the governments of various countries, as well as many large and small arms groups. If Hurricane Group were to occupy 90% of the market share, it would be a true monopoly in the truest sense of the word. Hurricane Group was bound to be an eyesore to many eyes, and danger lurked everywhere. In order to maintain ecological balance, the Hurricane Group let go of this ambition and took a step back to protect the overall situation. However, a while ago, Gong Jie had snatched a piece of fat meat from the hands of an arms group leader. Gong Xiaoying was worried that he would be in trouble if he was so arrogant, so he sent more people to secretly follow him. Gong Xiaoying thought highly of Gong Jie. The reason why he thought highly of him was not only because of Gong Jie's own ability, but also because of another very important reason. That was, Mu Qingqing's blood flowed in his body. Mu Qingqing was the woman that his father loved the most. He had devoted his entire life to her. This woman definitely occupied the thickest and most important part of his father's life. Because of his mother, as their flesh and blood, his father had poured a lot of effort into him. Gong Jie had returned to the Gong family when he was 9 years old. He had experienced many dangers and bloodshed, and with Gong Xiaoying's strong support, he was able to achieve his current status. Therefore, Gong Xiaoying's heart was extremely biased towards him. However, he was worried that since Gong Xiaoying had sent so many people to guard him, it was inevitable that he would discover some clues. If he discovered the existence of his sister, then it would be a little troublesome. His sister was very happy now. Even if he didn't want to admit it, She had a happy family now. She was simple and happy. He couldn't bear to break this peace. When he thought about how these guys had been following him for so long, they must have grasped Yun Shirshi's whereabouts. He questioned, "Just pretend that you don't know what happened today. Do you hear me? If my father asks about it, just tell him that I'm resting in the hotel." Second young master, what do you mean by this? Gong Jie grabbed one of them by the collar and said coldly, "Just pretend that you don't know about that woman's whereabouts today. No one is to disturb her. If I find out that you reported this to my father, I'll kill you." Chapter 2082. His aura was very scary. Just a few words, but it was filled with a hair-raising threat. They hurriedly nodded and immediately expressed that they would not make this matter public. "That's good. Go back and tell father that I don't need your protection. Understand?" "Yes." Second young master understood. "Go back." Gong Jie waved his hand to chase them away. The bodyguards meticulously got into the car and then quickly left. He turned around, his gaze deep. When Yin Shirshir returned home, Muyaja had already returned home, but she did not see the two little fellows. She thought that he must have driven the two little fellows out for a walk on the way home and came back first. Muyaja stood on the balcony. It was rare that he was not working in the study. Instead, he just stood there, smoking silently. In the ashtray beside him, there were a few cigarette butts. Yin Shirshir carefully counted them. There were actually quite a few. Today, his smoking addiction seemed to be very strong. One cigarette after another. Things like cigarettes were actually not good. It was harmful to the body. She rarely saw him smoke, especially such a strong one. This was the first time she saw it. Ever since he returned home, she sensitively sensed that he seemed to be in a bad mood today. Something must have happened in the company. Yin Shirshir slowly walked over. Her footsteps were so light that he did not notice when she entered the room. She carefully wrapped her arms around him from behind. Muyaja was startled. Realizing that it was her, he reached out his hand and gently covered the back of her hand. He smiled faintly. "You're back." And Yin Shirshir responded and went around to him. She took his cigarette and put it out in the ashtray. She approached him. "You're smoking a lot today? Are you in a bad mood?" "No." "You're still saying no? You definitely wouldn't smoke so much usually." Yin Shirshir could not help but be a little worried. "Did something happen in the company? Why don't you tell me about it? I can give you some advice. What kind of plan can you come up with?" Muyaja lovingly smiled and gently rubbed her head, but his eyes were playful. "Even if I can't give you any advice, I can at least give you some advice." Muyaja smirked and said, "Today, second uncle came to talk to me." He said that if I continue to be entangled with you, he will consider another candidate for the patriarch position." "What do you mean?" "Don't think too much." Yin Shirshir quickly shook her head. "I won't. Don't worry. If there's anything, just tell me." Muyaja suddenly asked seriously, "Let me ask you first, if I'm no longer the lord of the Mujia, are you still willing to follow me?" Yin Shirshir pondered for a moment. She did not know where he stood on this question. After a moment of silence, she smiled and said honestly, "I didn't choose to follow you because I coveted the patriarch position. At first, I chose to be with you because I wanted you to have a father. I wanted him to grow up in an environment where he could play the role of a father and accompany him. Secondly, I like you." Muyaja's eyes flickered. He already had this answer in his heart, but now that it came out of her mouth, it gave him great comfort. He knew that this woman was devoted to him, and she did not covet his other identities. He knew this very well. Chapter 2083. Muyaja suddenly said in a deep voice, "The reason why I'm able to become the head of the Mu family is because of my bloodline and second uncle's support. This afternoon, second uncle came to the company and talked to me. It was more of a showdown than a conversation." "A showdown?" "He said that if I continue to be stubborn, he might support someone else to inherit the position of the head of the family. He's very unhappy about my marriage with you." This afternoon, Mu Linfeng went to the Mu group to look for him and had a serious talk with him. His first request was that he immediately divorce Yun Shirshir, a troublesome woman. Secondly, he said that if he was willing to divorce Yun Shirshir, not only would he hand over 10% of his shares, but he would also arrange a marriage for him to marry the princess of the Morocco royal family. This way, not only would the Mu family status rise, but it would also be a great benefit to him. If it had been a few years ago, he might have expressed great interest and would not have needed to think too much about it. He would have agreed very quickly. After all, it didn't matter who the marriage partner was. As long as it could bring him benefits, it was enough. But now, he didn't think so anymore. He could lose everything, but he couldn't lose her. Mu Yaja rejected this condition without thinking. Mu Linfeng immediately showed great disappointment. Mu Yaja knew that Mu Linfeng was already very disappointed in him. He had already done his best to come to this point. What he needed was not an outstanding head of the family, but an obedient chess piece. Unfortunately, he wasn't such a chess piece. Thus, Mu Linfeng wanted to support Mu Yinxing to become the head of the family. Even if he didn't say it explicitly, Mu Yaja already guessed the answer. Everyone in the Mu family, especially the elders of Mu Linfeng's generation, had different thoughts about him. Ever since he became the head of the family, his actions were too big, so much so that Mu Linfeng developed a great hostility toward him. In fact, Mu Yaja originally wanted to leave the Mu family and seek another world, but now was not the best time. Although the Xingyu Financial Group, under his name, was of a decent size, it still lacked a lot of resources. Relying on the Mu family, he couldn't let go of the position of the head of the family. Originally, his plan was very good. Everything was going according to plan. Only Yun Shishir's appearance was outside of the plan. Because of her, he had angered many people. In the eyes of these people, he could no longer be tolerated. They wanted to eradicate him and kick him out of the Mu family. Yu had already considered this issue and had discussed it with him. Yu had also stated that as long as Daddy needed it, all the forces under his name would be at his disposal. However, Mu Yaja was arrogant, especially when it came to his career. How could he rely on his son? He refused without thinking. He had accepted his son's kind intentions, but he had not reached the point where he needed to rely on his son's influence to expand his territory. However, this point was still within his grasp. If Mu Linfeng ignored the big picture and was bent on eliminating him, in the end, both sides would suffer. Moreover, the Mu group's vitality would be greatly damaged. Without him, the Mu group would only turn into a ruin. Chapter 2084. The horn of war had already sounded. What was coming next might be an extremely cruel war, but he was not afraid at all. Yin Shishir held his hand and smiled. No matter what it is, I'll face it with you. Okay. Mu Yaja held her hand and pulled her into his embrace, kissing her forehead. As the new year approached, Yin Shishir was already prepared to buy New Year's goods. She found out that there was a mall that was offering discounts for the entire store. In order to welcome the Lunar New Year, the items were very cheap and were worth the price. Hence, she specially called Mu Yaja and asked him to come home earlier tonight. It just so happened that Mu Yaja returned home early at 6 o'clock in the evening. Yun Yeching and Yun Yeho were also there. After a hearty dinner, the family drove to the mall. Yun Shishir had just stepped into the mall when she felt a crow flying over her head. Have you ever seen a mall without a single person? The first thing she saw when she stepped into the mall was a mountain of goods with discount signs hanging all over it. However, other than the festive music playing from the loudspeakers, everything else in the huge mall was silent. Other than the salespeople and employees stationed in the mall, there was no one else. Yin Shishir was nervous for a moment. She thought that the mall was not open for business, but there was no sign at the entrance saying that it was closed today. She went to the service counter to ask about it, but the first thing the attendant said made her feel like she was in a dream. You're Madame Yin Shishir, right? How do you know my name? Yin Shishir was stunned. She smiled and explained, in order to welcome you and not cause you any trouble, the mall has already been cleared according to Chairman Mu's instructions. Cleared? Yin Shishir's eyes widened. At the side, Xiao Yiqin and Yu Yu curiously leaned on the counter. They sized up the mall and instantly understood what was going on. Daddy probably did not like places with too many people, so he ordered the mall's manager to clear the place in advance. Mommy is a public figure. Yu Yu reminded her kindly. Daddy must be afraid that there will be too many people and it will cause unnecessary trouble. That's why he ordered them to clear the area. That's so boring. Shopping for New Year's goods has to be done in a crowded place to enjoy the new year. Yin Shishir said, with some frustration. In fact, she was fully prepared when she left the house. She was fully armed and equipped with everything she needed. However, when she walked into the mall, there was no one there. She had been eyeing them covetously and waiting for them. In the end, Xiao Yichen covered his mouth and snickered. Looks like Daddy's good intentions have backfired. Yu said, actually, Mommy, this is not bad. After all, if there are too many people, it will indeed bring a lot of trouble. Xiao Yichen added, that's good too. Mommy, we can shop for New Year's goods in peace. Yin Shishir nodded. All right. She wondered if it was worth it for Mu Yaja to clear the place. She had originally found a mall with a higher discount to save some money. If he had paid a hefty price to clear the place, then in the end, wouldn't it be not saving money but spending money instead? Yun Yeching walked over and said, this is a small token of appreciation from Yaja. Sure, you're earning a lot now. There's no need to care about such trivial matters. It's rare for the family to gather together to shop. This is the main purpose. Yin Shishir thought that it made sense. That's true. Chapter 2085. Yin Shishir smiled. Holding the little lads in each hand, she said to Mu Yaja, let's go in. Mu Yaja walked over and gently took Yu's little hand from her. Yun Yeching pushed Yun Yeho's wheelchair, and the family entered the mall in a grand manner. Other than peanuts, melon seeds, and pistachios, they also prepared gifts for visiting relatives and friends during the new year. Yin Shishir did not have many relatives, but it was unavoidable to buy some gifts during the festive season. After buying a few big gift bags, Yin Shishir was in high spirits. In the past, the end of the year was the time when she was most worried. She needed money to buy new clothes for the new year, from down jackets to pants to new shoes. It was a huge expense. Every year after the new year, she would be strapped for cash and feel very cramped. Although Yu would receive a lot of red packets during the new year, and some of the wealthier relatives would give red packets of a few thousand yuan each, Yin Shishir had never touched them. Instead, she opened an account in the bank and deposited them. Now, there should be a sizable sum in this account. Now that she had earned a lot, she no longer needed to shop around and compare discounts before making a decision. If she saw something she liked, she would just add it to the shopping cart. After shopping for the New Year goods, Yin Shishir led the family to Brand Street to buy new clothes. She suddenly realized that Mu Yaja was very particular about his clothes. Which suit in his closet was not handmade by famous brands? Which one of them did not cost tens of thousands? Although there were many luxury goods on Branded Street, these branded stores paled in comparison to the ones he was wearing. Yin Shishir could not help feeling a little uneasy. She walked to a men's clothing store and carefully probed, "Do you like the clothes here?" She originally thought that he would not like them and reject them in disdain. Unexpectedly, he took a serious look at them and said with interest, "Let's go in and take a look." "Okay." Yin Shishir smiled brightly and held his hand as they walked in. The clothing store was selling overcoats with good designs. All of them were slim fit and complemented one's physique well. This was especially so for a tall man like Mu Yaja. Even the supermodels in the fashion shows could not compare to his aura when he put on these overcoats. Yin Shishir picked a few designs and asked him to try them on. Mu Yaja patiently tried them on one by one. It wasn't the first time she had bought clothes for him, but it was the first time she had bought clothes for him that cost at most a few thousand yuan. She didn't know why, but she actually had the ability to buy him those big brands. But when she saw him wearing the brands that he liked, which were slightly less impressive, she felt that their worlds were finally on the same level. It was as if he had integrated into her world. This kind of intimacy was indescribably warm. While Mu Yaja was trying on the clothes, Yun Yeching pushed Yin Yeho to the other stores to look at the silk quilts. Xiao Chen and Yu sat on the sofa and waited. Yin Shishir, too, went through the clothes one by one, wanting to choose a few that were more compatible with his aura. She didn't put on any makeup when she went out today. She was completely barefaced, and she was wearing a very low furry hat and a pair of glasses. Therefore, she didn't look as bright and beautiful as she usually did on screen. Instead, she looked more reserved and gentle, which was unique to women. She didn't look as dazzling as before. Chapter 2086. Try this one on. Yin Shishir picked up a long trench coat. Muyaja only nodded lightly. Okay. He took the coat and walked into the small fitting room. Yin Shirshir couldn't help but worry that he would hit his head. The shop assistants didn't recognize her at first glance. Blushing, they went up to her and asked softly, pretty lady, is this handsome guy your husband?" Yin Shirshir was a little uneasy. She was a little worried that they would recognize her. However, when she saw the stunned expressions on their faces, she guessed that they were probably focused on Muyaja and didn't notice her. She smiled and said, "Yeah, he's my husband." "Wow, he's so young. I knew it. I could tell at a glance that they're a young couple. Don't they say that people in the city get married later? Why are they getting married so early?" Young couple. Yin Shirshir's heart was suddenly warmed by this word. She loved this feeling so much. She held his hand openly and said righteously, "This is my husband." This feeling was pretty good. Yu snorted and said to the shop assistants, "My mommy looks very young, but she's already in her 20s. Xiaoichen added, "Yeah, daddy and mommy are almost in their 30s. They're not young anymore." Yin Shirshir glanced coldly at Xiaoichen. This guy was marked by the company he kept. After being with Yu for so long, he had learned bad things from him. He was so sarcastic and not cute at all. The shop assistants were shocked by the two little kids' cuteness. They covered their faces and exclaimed, "Pretty lady, are these two little kids your sons?" Yin Shirshir nodded. The shop assistants were extremely envious. "Oh my God, they're so beautiful. They look just like those mixed-race celebrities on TV. Look at their big, bright eyes. Especially their eyelashes. They're so long and curly. Yes, if I could give birth to two such cute twins, I would wake up laughing in my dreams." At the end of the day, it all depends on your parents' genes. The beauty is so beautiful, and her husband is so handsome. Her baby must be very beautiful. As salespeople, their mouths were as sweet as honey. Moreover, what they said was also the truth. Yu and Xiaoichen had inherited Yin Shirshir's bright eyes and Muyaja's handsome features. Therefore, even though they were still young, they could already imagine how handsome they would be when they grew up. Yin Shirshir was very satisfied. Any mother would feel happy if her child was praised for being cute. She couldn't help but pinch Xiaoichen and Yu's cheeks and complained, "These two little guys are cute, but sometimes they're mischievous. Sometimes he's very naughty and often causes trouble." This shows that the child is smart. It's better for the child to be mischievous. If he's wooden, he won't be cute. One of the shop assistants stared silently at Yin Shirshir for a while and suddenly said in surprise, "Pretty lady, you look like a movie star." She loved watching movies and would often go to the cinema with her classmates after work. However, she said that she looked like a movie star because she would never suspect that the person in front of her was the real deal. Chapter 2087. Moreover, this woman was so gentle. She did not seem like the glamorous celebrities on TV. She did not put on any airs and made people want to get close to her. When Yin Shirshir heard this, she was not shocked at all. Instead, she asked calmly, "Who's a movie star?" She already knew the answer. However, she had to face it calmly to avoid suspicion. The shop assistant said excitedly, "Yin Shirshir, there was a very popular movie called The Green Apple a while ago. Have you seen it? Beautiful?" "Yes. Now that you mention it, it reminds me." "Indeed, many people say that I look like a movie star, but I never pay attention to the actors when I watch movies, so I can't remember who it is." Yu's lips twitched. Mommy's ability to spout nonsense with a straight face had improved. It seemed that her ability to react on the spot had improved. If it were in the past, she would have felt guilty. "Have you seen that movie? Gu Xingzi starred in it. It's amazing." The other shop assistants looked at each other. "No, the movie tickets are so expensive. I can't bear to spend so much money. We're already very busy working overtime. How can we have the time to watch a movie? Xiaolu, and I even have a part-time job. The rent has increased again recently. We can't wait to split $1 into $2. The shop assistants smiled as they spoke. Their expressions were light, but Yin Shirshir could feel the bitterness in their expressions. More than a year ago, she was probably like these young ladies. Every day, every month, she would have to worry about rent and work hard to make ends meet. The cost of living in the capital was very high. In addition, land prices were not cheap. The rent was already exorbitant. These young ladies did not look like they were locals. They looked like they had come to the capital from other provinces. When they came, they had simple and ordinary dreams. However, after they settled down, they had to work hard for their dreams. At that time, it was the same for her. Her dream at that time was actually very simple. She hoped to have a place that was neither too big nor too small. It did not need to be too big. It did not need to be too big. It had to be 80 square meters, 2 bedrooms, a small study, and a balcony with good lighting. That was already very blissful. She hoped that one day, in this bustling city, there would be a lamp lit up because of her. Now, his dream had come true, but he still missed the hard times of the past. At that time, although she was living a poor life, it was because of her poverty that even a bowl of hot soy milk before work or a cup of milk tea after work made her feel happy. At that time, happiness turned out to be so ordinary and simple. She was so easily satisfied. However, now that he had everything, he had lost that simple feeling of happiness. She would no longer feel happy simply because of a bowl of soy milk or a cup of milk tea. When a person had too much, their mentality would change as well. Or perhaps it would be harder for them to discover the happiness in the ordinary. At this moment, she was even more envious of her past self. She was envious of these optimistic young ladies who embraced their dreams. Muyaja had once said that he envied her. At that time, she often couldn't understand it, but now she understood it deeply. He was probably envious that she could find happiness in the ordinary and simple. Chapter 2088. A few shop assistants immediately surrounded him and led him to the mirror. Yu also looked over and couldn't help but widen her eyes. Xiaoi Chen, on the other hand, was so stunned that his mouth gaped open. Wow! He jumped off the sofa and ran to Muyaja's side. He circled around him, his watery eyes shining with amazement. Daddy looks so handsome in this, right? This handsome guy looks really handsome in this trench coat. He doesn't pale in comparison to those handsome celebrities on TV. Your mommy has such good taste. She really knows how to pick. At least, I've never seen a customer who can wear this trench coat so elegantly. These words weren't from the shop assistants' mouths or flattery. Muyaja's trench coat did indeed suit his aura. Wasn't there a saying that went, "Clothes make the man, and gold makes the Buddha"? If a person was handsome, it would be the icing on the cake if he had a matching piece of clothing. Yin Shishir couldn't help but feel smug. Those shop assistants kept saying, "You have such good taste." It was enough to make her feel like she was floating in the air. Muyaja stood in the mirror and took a look. He also felt satisfied. Not bad. Just one word was enough to show that he was really satisfied. He was an extremely introverted man. When he encountered something that he was especially satisfied with, it was difficult for him to easily express his joy. For ordinary things, he would only say, "It's okay." If he said, "Not bad," it meant that he was very satisfied. Yin Shishir smiled brightly. She held his arm and said with a smile, "Don't I have good taste?" "Yeah, then why don't you give me a reward?" Yin Shishir said deliberately. "Reward?" Muyaja's handsome face turned to face her calmly. He raised his eyebrows slightly, but it was full of mischief. "What reward do you want?" Yin Shishir didn't say anything. She only said, "Hee, it depends on your performance." Muyaja suddenly held her face and gave her a light peck on her red lips. His eyes were full of indulgence as he lightly touched the surface of the water. The shop assistants behind them were caught off guard and were stuffed with dog food. They couldn't speak of their bitterness. Seriously, what was with this public display of affection? Did he consider the feelings of the single people? They were still single and didn't have boyfriends. Being showcased by such a loving couple, the few of them felt like they had been beaten to a pulp. Yin Shishir turned around and asked, "How much is this dress?" "Miss, are you sure it's this dress?" "Yes, this gown is on sale recently. The original price is 2,999 yuan. The current price is 2,199 yuan, 21.99. She could not help but frown. So cheap. She entered and saw the luxurious decor inside. She thought that the clothes would cost more than 10,000 yuan. This was a brick-and-mortar store, and it was so affordable. However, when the shop assistants saw her frown, they thought that she was complaining about the price. They immediately tried to persuade her. Don't be fooled by the price. It's not just because it's cheap. The material and quality are all here. You can touch it. It's handmade and made of real wool. I'm not complaining about the price. Yin Shishir immediately explained. Did she look so poor that she couldn't even afford 2,199 yuan? Can I pay by card? Yes. The shop assistant brought the car machine over. Yin Shishir handed over a card, paid, and signed. The shop assistant took the dress to be ironed, packaged, and handed it to her. You and your husband are so loving. I'm so envious. Chapter 2089. Yeah, your husband dotes on you a lot. The way he looked at you when he kissed you just now was really enviable. If I had a husband like that, my life would be perfect. Yin Shishir smiled and stuck out her tongue mischievously. Actually, he's quite a wooden person. He looks very cold. The shop assistants were smiling, but they were criticizing him in their hearts. Ah, you think so too? Your husband is really cold. Aside from you, he's as cold as an iceberg to strangers. Yin Shishir held onto Mu Yaja's arm. After they walked out of the mall, Yu and Xiao Chen were clamoring for milk tea. The weather at night was exceptionally cold. Especially as they went further north, the wind at night felt like it was filled with ice, and it was especially torturous. Yu and Xiao Chen didn't like milk tea, but the weather was so cold that they felt much warmer with a cup of milk tea in their hands. While they were waiting in the milk tea shop, Yin Shishir was also feeling a little uncomfortable from the cold. She kept blowing into her palms and rubbing them. When Mu Yaja saw this, he walked over and gently wrapped her hands with his large palms. His hands were unexpectedly warm. His large palms completely wrapped around her small hands, and the warmth from his palms was continuously transmitted to her. Yin Shishir was a little surprised. Your hands are so warm. Mu Yaja's lips curled into a smile as he held her hand tighter. He had always kept his hands in his pockets and rarely took them out. Along the way, his hands were already warm from holding them. Mu Yaja lowered his head and gently exhaled on her small hands. He rubbed them gently with a serious look on his face, as if he were doing something very important. Yin Shishir's gaze suddenly froze. She stared at his handsome face in a daze and couldn't look away. He carefully rubbed her hands and suddenly realized that she was looking at his face. He furrowed his brows and looked up. When he met her gaze, he saw that she looked a little surprised. Puzzled, he asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing." "Why?" She snapped out of her daze and smiled. "I'm just looking at you." Mu Yaja gently kissed her fingertips that had turned red from the cold. His voice was so gentle that it seemed as though water could be squeezed out of them. "Are your hands still cold?" Yin Shishir's face heated up from his doting gaze. She shyly lowered her head and stammered, "Yeah, they're not that cold anymore." Mu Yaja held her hands in his arms and said softly. Feeling uneasy, Yin Shishir awkwardly shifted her face away shyly. "Oh, it's nothing. It's just red from the cold." It would have been better if she did not turn around. The moment she did, she saw little Chen and Yu standing at the side with mocking expressions. The two little guys were imitating them. Yu stood facing Xiao Chen and held Xiao Chen's hands like a boyfriend. He said affectionately, "Are you freezing?" Xiao Chen pretended to be extremely shy. His eyelashes fluttered nervously, and he looked as shy as a little deer. He lowered his head and said hesitantly, "No." Yu imitated Mu Yaja's earlier behavior. He gently lowered his head and kissed his fingertips. He looked up and affectionately repeated what Mu Yaja had said earlier. "Are your hands still cold?" "Yeah, they're not that cold anymore." Chapter 2090. On the other hand, Yi went all out with his acting. He imitated his father's overbearing and affectionate manner and stuffed Xiao Chen's hand into his chest. Yin Shishir was speechless. These two rascals, were they purposely imitating their loving scene to make fun of her? Xiao Chen put on a shy expression. He smiled coquettishly as he tried to push him away. Yu, on the other hand, coldly recited his lines. "Are you shy, baby?" Xiao Chen blushed as he mumbled, "What? You're calling me baby in front of outsiders. I'm so shy." Yin sure couldn't help but feel ashamed. Muyaja glanced at him and grunted. It was an extremely cold sound, but it seemed to be a signal. Xiao Chen immediately retracted his hand. Then, he raised his hand and accused, "It's not my fault. It's Yu Yu's fault." Yu Yu was exasperated. What an irresponsible fellow. He had cooperated well. Now, with just a glare from his father, he had become the scapegoat. After the milk tea was made, the three of them each had a cup. They weren't in a hurry to drink it. Instead, they warmed their hands first. As for Muyaja, he, on the other hand, followed behind them, in charge of carrying all kinds of bags. The three of them, on the other hand, were in charge of giggling and chatting. Yu Yu turned around and glanced at Muyaja, who was carrying all the bags in his hands. He couldn't help but cover his mouth and snicker. He didn't forget to take pleasure in his misfortune. "Daddy, you're working so hard. You're just like a little follower." A certain big boss, who was described as a little follower, glanced at him coldly and snorted arrogantly to express his displeasure. Yin Sure and Xiao Chen also turned around and looked sympathetically at Muyaja. Xiao Chen, on the other hand, appeared very humane and gently consoled him. "Daddy, you did well. You've worked hard today. Stinking brat, you only know how to gloat." Even so, Muyaja felt a sense of warmth that he hadn't felt in a long time. In the past, he didn't have much of an impression of the New Year. It was hard for him to feel the warmth of the Chinese New Year. What he felt the most was that it was close to the end of the year, so the bank's approval process for financing was much slower. All the rhythms began to become hurried and hurried. Many employees had applied for leave. The atmosphere on the street also became jubilant. However, it was as if all of this had nothing to do with him. As usual, even on New Year's Eve, he would often work overtime in the company, facing the boring annual reports and a thick stack of proposals, listening to the hands of the clock as it slowly approached midnight. He could not experience the so-called happiness of a family reunion during the Chinese New Year, nor could he understand the difference between the Chinese New Year and normal days. Now, however, he could vaguely taste the warmth of the Chinese New Year. Xiao Chen walked over and took the two gift bags from his hands. The little guy was strong, so the two bags were relatively easy for him. Yin Yeching and Yin Yeho bought 4 silk quilts. As the weather turned cold, he thought that he should change the quilts for the new year. The silk quilts were very warm. Since they were on sale now, he bought 4 sets in one go. One for Xiao Chen and Yu Yu, one for Muyaja and Yin Sure, and the other 2 for him and Yin Yeho. It was just nice. Chapter 2091. In a parking lot, a group of people chatted and laughed as they walked to the parking lot. After placing their luggage in the trunk, they got into the car. Muyaja had just closed the trunk when he acutely sensed a strange gaze behind him. He turned his head warily and glanced around, but he did not notice anything out of the ordinary. His intuition was especially sharp. Even if he was being watched from 100 meters away, he could still raise his guard. He kept feeling a pair of extremely cold eyes staring at him, silently sizing him up. That gaze seemed to be filled with thorns, as if it could not wait to pierce through the muscles on his back and into his heart. It was also like a venomous snake eyeing its prey. However, the parking lot was extremely dark. There were some problems with the lights in a few places. They flickered on and off, blinding one's eyes and obstructing one's line of sight. However, that sudden stare still lingering in her mind. Yin Sure noticed his strange expression and could not help but feel a little nervous. She thought that some paparazzi had noticed him looking up and was squatting down to secretly take pictures. So she asked anxiously, "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Muyaja neatly tidied up and escorted them into the car. After the car slowly drove away, a person slowly walked out from a dark corner. Judging from the figure, it was a petite woman. She was dressed in a cold black robe, and a large hat covered her head, revealing only half of her incomparably ferocious and terrifying face. An extremely strange aura continuously emanated from the woman's body. It was gloomy, terrifying, and filled with the aura of death. Especially that pair of eyes, which were especially ferocious and vicious. It was as if she had returned to the human world from the gates of hell. She was neither human nor ghost, and there was not a trace of life in her. She watched the car leave before slowly turning around and disappearing into the darkness. These few days, Yin Shishir stopped all her work and focused on tidying up the house. Since it was the end of the year, it was time to tidy up the house a little and decorate it with a festive atmosphere. The Yin family's tradition was to do a thorough cleaning during the new year. Muyaja originally wanted to hire a servant, but Yin Shishir said that since it was rare for her to rest, she should take advantage of the break to do it herself. After all, this was her own home. With Yu Yu's virtuous little helper, Xiaoyichen also raised his hand and volunteered to participate in the cleaning. Yin Shishir thought about it and decided that the cleaning would take at most a day. It wouldn't be too tiring. The third and fourth floors were not commonly used. As long as the first and second floors were cleaned, there would be no problem. It was easy to say, but when it came to cleaning, she felt the sadness in it. Speaking of which, it was no wonder that those rich people who knew how to enjoy themselves would rather choose a large bungalow than a villa. Those who bought a villa mostly hired servants. Due to the structure and overall structure of the villa, there were a lot of blind spots in the villa, especially the corners of the stairs. It was easy for dust to accumulate on every step, and a vacuum cleaner was not of much use. After tidying up a few rooms, Yin Shishir was so tired that she could not straighten her back. She was so tired that she was panting. She took a break from work and slacked off. Chapter 2092. Seeing Yin Shishir slumped on the sofa, he snickered at her misfortune. "Mommy is so disappointing. You're actually slacking off." With that, he walked to the balcony as if he was floating. Yin Shishir also hated herself for being so disappointing. She looked at the diligent little fella and saw that he had been busy all this time. He didn't even have time to catch his breath, but he didn't look tired either. On the other hand, Xiaoyichen saw that Yin Shishir was slumped on the sofa and also collapsed into a ball. "Mommy, I can't take it anymore. I'm so tired." Xiaoyichen was listless. He never did housework. Usually, he would follow behind Yu and help out a little, but it was only light chores. Yu rarely assigned him heavy tasks. When the cleaning started, the three of them sat down seriously, assigned tasks, and divided the responsibilities. Yin Shishir was in charge of collecting and dusting. Xiaoyichen was in charge of cleaning the windows, and Yu was in charge of washing the clothes and mopping the floor. At first, Xiaoyichen was full of confidence. Wasn't it just cleaning windows? When he was serving in the military, he had gone through all kinds of hardships and tiredness. Cleaning windows was underestimating him. However, when it was time to do it, he looked at the row of floor-to-ceiling windows on the second floor. He was so shocked that his jaw almost dropped to the ground. There were so many windows. He didn't notice it when he was living here, but when he paid special attention during the cleaning, he realized that there were more than 30 windows on the first and second floors. Oh my God, what did that mean? The first floor was still okay, but the second floor was full of floor-to-ceiling windows. As he cleaned the windows one by one, he felt as if the sky was about to collapse. Yu noticed his ashen face and said faintly, "What's wrong? Are you scared?" Just now, someone was saying confidently that cleaning windows was a piece of cake. "We haven't even started, and you're already backing out? What are you talking about?" Xiaoyichen puffed up his chest confidently and volunteered, "Give me a day. I promise I'll wipe it clean." Yu snorted in disdain. Then she glanced at the tools in his hands and said coldly, "You're not allowed to use these tools. They won't be clean. Put on gloves first, get a basin of hot water, dissolve the soap, and wipe it all over with a rag. When it's dry, wipe it with a newspaper bit by bit. That's the only way to make it clean." Xiaoyichen opened his mouth in surprise. "Newspapers? If I use your tool to wipe it, it will leave a mark. As someone with OCD, I can't stand it." As he spoke, Yu patted him on the shoulder and said, "All the best." Then he went downstairs. Xiaoyichen gulped, then rolled up his sleeves and started working according to Yu's instructions. At first, the work was done step by step, so it wasn't too tiring. However, when it came to the last step, he leaned on the windows and wiped them with a newspaper bit by bit. After just 10 windows, he felt as if he was about to be crippled. After Xiao Yiqin finished wiping the 10 windows, he floated down like a ghost and collapsed on the sofa. He felt as if he was a crippled prince. He was so tired. It was more tiring than doing 10 sets of push-ups at once. When Yu saw him lying down, she thought that he had successfully completed his task and ran upstairs to check. However, when she saw that he was only halfway done, she said angrily, "Mu Yiqin, come up here." Like an obedient puppy, Mu Yiqin obediently ran upstairs and was fiercely reprimanded by his younger brother. Are these windows considered clean? Chapter 2093. It's only clean when it looks like there's no glass in it. Yin Shishir's scalp went numb when she heard that. She couldn't be bothered to slack off and want to tidy up the cloakroom. However, the more she tidied up, the sadder she felt. Usually, when she came home, she didn't ask about the housework. However, every time she came home, the house was very clean and there wasn't a speck of dust. Although, to a certain extent, this was due to the hired helpers, it was more due to Yu's usual love and acceptance. Especially in the cloakroom, the clothes, shoes, and hats were all neatly arranged. Yin Shishir even suspected that Yu was a Virgo. At night, Yin Shishir was so tired that she was fuming. She felt as though her soul was about to come out of her mouth when she lay down. She was really exhausted. Xiao Yiqin was equally exhausted. He slumped on the sofa and responded lazily to whatever she said. He didn't have any energy at all. As for Yu, not only did he complete his role perfectly, but he also washed the clothes and mopped the floor. He had already returned from grocery shopping and was preparing dinner in full swing in the kitchen. This guy, didn't he know how to be tired? The problem was, although it was just washing the clothes and mopping the floor, many of the clothes in the house had to be washed by hand and not by machine. Furthermore, there were a few places where Yu had to kneel on the floor and wipe them clean bit by bit. God, why was this guy so energetic? She wanted to ask him if he was tired after doing so much, but she was too embarrassed to ask. She couldn't even compare to a child. Yin Shishir pulled herself together and got up. She walked to the kitchen and asked if she needed help. However, when she opened the door, she saw Yu carefully picking the vegetables with his head lowered. She felt a mix of emotions when she saw the fine beads of perspiration on his forehead. This child, he was obviously very tired, right? How could anyone have so much energy, let alone a child? After doing so much housework, he must be exhausted. Now, he still had to prepare dinner for them. For a moment, Yin Shishir felt extremely sad. She was both touched and ashamed. She immediately walked over to take over the work from him. Yu's next sentence hit her hard. "Mommy, you better lie down on the sofa obediently. Don't cause trouble." Yin Shishir, her heart broke slightly, and she explained, "I'll give you a hand, okay? I'm pretty good at picking vegetables." Yu said in disdain, "I won't let you touch the kitchen. Once when you were cooking, you didn't even pick out the ingredients properly, and it affected the taste." Yin Shishir felt as if thousands of arrows had pierced her heart. She moved a small stool over and sat down. Yu didn't want her to interfere, so she sat quietly by his side and accompanied him. Yu was very careful when picking the vegetables. Even if it was a small cluster of yellowed leaves, he would still pick them out. He could also easily distinguish between the tender and old vegetables. Yin Shishir suddenly felt bad. You've been busy the whole day. It must be tiring, right? Yu grunted and glanced at her. However, he saw that her eyes were full of heartache. He couldn't help feeling touched and stopped what he was doing. "Mommy, Yu isn't tired. How can you not be tired?" Chapter 2094. It's a little tiring, but Yu doesn't feel aggrieved at all. Yu smiled gently. His eyes seemed to be filled with fragments of moonlight, warm and moving. It's a blissful feeling to protect your home with all your heart. When they first moved into the new house, Mu Yaja assigned a group of servants to clean the house and make it look brand new every day. At first, Yu was happy to be free. Who would want to work? He let the servants do all the dirty and tiring work, and he was happy to be relaxed and carefree. However, Yu gradually realized that the house was much cleaner and he was much more relaxed. However, he also gradually realized that it seemed to lack a little liveliness. It was like a hotel. It was clean and tidy, but it didn't feel warm at all. Hence, in the end, he tidied up the bedroom, living room, bathroom, and study where Mommy and Daddy lived. Only in this way could one feel the warmth of home. However, Yu didn't feel tired at all, especially when he was washing Mommy and Daddy's clothes. He felt a sense of warmth spontaneously. Taking care of a home seriously gave him great satisfaction. Perhaps if it were an ordinary person, they probably wouldn't be able to understand such a feeling. However, for a child who was born with a lack of security, this could more or less make up for some of the uneasiness. Yu smiled and said, "Mommy, I feel very at ease with you accompanying me like this." Yin Shirshi's heart warmed. She raised the corner of her mouth and gently stroked his head. Suddenly, her cell phone rang. She took out her cell phone, but the screen showed an unfamiliar number. She thought that it was a harassing call and immediately hung up. A few seconds later, her cell phone rang again. She pressed the answer button. "Hello? Who is it? Is this Yin Shirshir?" An unfamiliar but steady man's voice came from the other end. From his voice, she could tell that he was about 50 or 60 years old. From his tone, she could tell that he was a rather steady and mature man. She was secretly shocked. His voice sounded very unfamiliar. At least, she didn't know this man. However, this person directly called out her name, so she was a little surprised. "How do you know my name? You must be surprised to know your name, right? Hee hee. Your name reverberates like thunder in my ears." She didn't know what this man meant, but he sounded like an enemy rather than a friend. There was a hint of mockery and sarcasm in his tone. In short, it gave people a particularly uncomfortable feeling. Yu also heard a voice. Even though she didn't hear the words clearly, she could vaguely feel that it wasn't a friendly person. He stopped what he was doing and looked at her. Yin Shirshir's voice turned cold. Since he wasn't being polite, she naturally wouldn't put on a friendly attitude. Her tone was also very cold. "Who exactly are you?" "I'm Yaja's uncle. I'm calling you because I want to invite you to my house as a guest. I have something important to discuss with you. Invite her to the Mu family." It felt like nothing good was going to happen. Yin Shirshir naturally wouldn't go there rashly. She said coldly, "You invited me to the Mu family for no reason. Why do I feel like it's a trap?" Chapter 2095. Mu Linfeng had the ability to infuriate someone. She was furious when she heard that, but she did not show any mercy. I've always paid attention to etiquette when it comes to elders. I admit that I'm not a lady from a prestigious family, but I know basic etiquette. However, the problem with respecting your elders is that you don't respect your elders and take advantage of your seniority. How can I respect such an elder willingly? Don't do to others what you don't want done to you. I'm sure you understand such a basic principle, right? There was silence on the other end of the line. Only the sound of Mu Linfeng's heavy breathing could be heard. Suddenly, a sneer came from the other end. He was so angry that he laughed out loud. "You don't have any other skills, but you do have a sharp tongue. However, I'm not in a mood to talk about other things with you right now. Right now, I have something important to discuss with you. Inviting you to the Mu residence is just a polite excuse. I'm being polite to you out of consideration for my nephew's reputation. If you continue to pester me endlessly, I won't be so polite anymore." "Uncle, what are you saying? What do you mean I'm pestering you endlessly? I've never pestered you endlessly, have I?" You guys, on the other hand, Mu Linfeng did not have the patience to hear her out. He coldly interrupted her and rudely said, "Cut the crap. Come over right now. I'll text you the address later. I hope to see you in half an hour. As for the details, we'll talk about it when we meet." "I won't go. Even if I do, I'll wait for him to come back first." Yin Shirshir's attitude was firm, but compared to Mu Linfeng, who had been in the political world for many years and had experienced many bloody storms, she was still lacking. Mu Yaja's swift and decisive methods had more or less inherited some of his father's style. Her tyrannical nature naturally caused him to be displeased. "Miss Yin, don't be so fierce with your words. We're not ferocious tigers and fierce beasts. We can't eat you, nor will we do anything to you. Don't worry. I asked you to come over to discuss matters and not to play dirty tricks with you. As for Yaja, I've already called him, and he'll be here soon. I hope you won't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit." With that, Mu Linfeng hung up abruptly. Yin Shirshir gripped her phone tightly. She was already burning with anger, But after hearing Mu Linfeng's overbearing words, this anger turned into an inferno. She increasingly felt that this old man was being unreasonable. Why should she go? What important thing could it be? What could it be? She doesn't covet the title of young mistress of the Mu family at all. On the other hand, the Mu family kept chasing after her and pestering her endlessly, making her very annoyed. Thinking of this, she sneered. That's fine, too. She had yet to meet the Mu family after all this time. Since Mu Linfeng had personally invited her today, how could she not go? Go. At the same time, he explained everything clearly. Whether it was pleasant or unpleasant, he had to make everything clear so that he wouldn't be annoyed in the future. Yin Shishir was prepared to lay her cards on the table. She stood up and said to Yu, Mommy has something to do and needs to go out. You and Xiao Chen stay at home obediently. Mommy, where are you going? I have something important to do. You guys have dinner first. Mommy will come back later. I'll go with you. Chapter 2096. Having said that, Yin Shishir walked to the living room, put on a jacket, tidied herself up, and left in a hurry. Xiao Yichen chased after her in a hurry, but Yin Shishir had already left. Confused, he turned around and asked, Yu, did you make Mommy angry? Yu glared at him. How is that possible? Mommy said she had something important to attend to, so she went out. Oh, what is it? Yu furrowed his brows and said in a deep voice, I think the Mu family invited her over. They said they have something to discuss. Xiao Chen was stunned. Yu suddenly asked, Who is Daddy's second uncle? Xiao Chen could not help but widen his eyes. Second uncle? Did second uncle ask Mommy to go over? Yu nodded with a solemn expression. Xiao Chen bit his lip and paced back and forth in the entryway. Suddenly, he said, What should we do? Second uncle is very domineering. I'm afraid Mommy will be aggrieved if she meets him alone. No, I want to go to the Mu family too. Yu suddenly whipped out his phone and called Li Hanlin. Li Hanlin was arranging the annual financial report. When he received the call, he immediately put down his work and said that he would be there soon. Before long, Li Hanlin arrived in his car. Yu and Xiao Chen got into the car in a hurry. Li Hanlin turned around and asked, President Yin, what can I do for you? Go to the Mu family. Li Hanlin was stunned. The Mu family? Yes. Yu glared at him when he saw that he was still in a daze. Right now. Okay. Li Hanlin did not care what was going on. He immediately put the car in gear and the car sped off. By the time Yin Shishir arrived at the address Mu Linfeng sent her, it was already 7 in the evening. Her stomach was rumbling with hunger, but at this moment she did not feel hungry at all. She was filled with anger, and her anger could not be quelled. She got out of the car, paid the bill, and walked toward the Mu family's gate. The main residence of the Mu family is located at Shurmao Champagne Lake, which is the most expensive land in the capital. In the beginning, there were other residents in the Shurmao Champagne Lake villa area. Most of them were of noble status and had a net worth of hundreds of millions. Later, the Mu group simply bought the entire land. Other than the Mu family's main residence, the rest of the land was razed to the ground overnight. Then, they redesigned the area around the Mu family's main residence according to feng shui. Yin Shishir had learned about this place. The average price was 500,000 yuan per square meter, which was shockingly expensive. When she reached the door, she was stopped by the bodyguard stationed at the door. Yin Shishir said directly, The Mu family invited me as a guest. You just have to inform them. The bodyguard made a phone call to understand the situation. Finally, he let her go. She was almost unimpeded all the way. Finally, she stopped at the entrance of the Mu family's residence and took a deep breath. Speaking of which, it was her first time visiting the Mu family's residence. Initially, the Mu family's residence gave her the impression that it was incomparably majestic. Just like her impression of the Mu family, the design of the main residence was in a classical Chinese style. There were artificial mountains, flowing water, pavilions, terraces, and pavilions. Even the style of the villa was renovated. It was extremely grand and imposing. Yin Shishir clenched her fists. She calmed herself down and calmed down a little. Chapter 2097. However, since she was already here, why not take advantage of this opportunity to lay things out and make things clear? She sucked in a deep breath of cold air, clenched her fists tightly, and slowly stepped inside. When she stepped into the main hall, even though she was mentally prepared, she was still shocked by the majestic array of people in the hall. The seats in the main hall were filled with people. There was no need to think about the identities of these people. Just from their thunderous auras, one could tell that they were not to be trifled with. In particular, the two people sitting at the head of the table were even more unusual. One of them was Mu Linfeng, and the one sitting beside him was Mu Shumin. She had a good memory and remembered both of them, especially Mu Shumin. They had met a few days ago, and there was quite a bit of resentment between them. As for Mu Linfeng, he should be the one who came to the engagement ceremony. Yin Shishir's thoughts were clear. Thinking about it carefully, she immediately realized that the man who had spoken to her over the phone earlier was probably this Mu Linfeng. They had met at the engagement ceremony, but it was difficult to recognize the voice on the phone, so she was not familiar with it. However, once they met, she figured things out. Although she did not know the identity of the person sitting at the head of the table, Mu Linfeng's aura was especially different. One could tell at a glance that he was of noble status. This man gave off an extremely steady and old-fashioned aura. In one aspect, he was very similar to Mu Yaja. He had a dignified aura that was deep and reserved. However, the dignified look in his eyes was something that could only be achieved through countless bloodbaths. Only those who truly wandered in the world of fame and wealth and stood at the center of power could have such a shocking aura. One look, and one could tell that he was from a military background. Hence, even though he was a little older, he still looked very energetic. He was wearing a tang suit that was ironed to perfection. Sitting at the head of the table, his back was ramrod straight, and his gaze was sharp like an eagle's beak, sharp and threatening. The servant brought a stool over and placed it beside her. However, it gave off the feeling that this stool was not meant for a guest, but for a criminal who was about to be judged. The seating arrangement is also very particular, especially for a big family like the Mu Jia. They pay more attention to the details. Yin Shishir glanced at the seat, but was not in a hurry to sit down. She laughed coldly and looked around. Even in the face of such a scene, she did not reveal the slightest bit of satisfaction or fear. She looked straight into Mu Linfeng's eyes and questioned coldly, "Is this how the Mu family treats its guests? Forgive me for being blunt, but it's very insincere." Mu Linfeng smiled when he heard this. This girl was young, but had a big mouth. She wasn't afraid at all in front of so many people. Instead, she was frank and honest. This reminded him of Yin Tianyou's small family. Surprisingly, there were some similarities between the mother and son. For example, their calmness in the face of danger was very similar. Mu Linfeng signaled with his eyes. The servant immediately walked over with trepidation and adjusted her seat to the guest's seat. Yin Shishir then smoothed her clothes and calmly sat down. The servant served her tea and politely retreated. Yin Shishir took a sip of tea, but was not in a hurry to speak. Chapter 2098. Yin Shishir took a sip of tea, but was in no hurry to speak. She had been invited, so there was no need for her to speak. Moreover, he was the one who had invited her over for a negotiation, so she naturally had to listen patiently to see what was the big deal. Apart from a few powerful figures in the Mu family and some powerful shareholders of Dishing Financial Group, there were also some elderly elders present. It was obvious that this was a Hongmin banquet. If it were anyone else, their legs would have trembled, and they would have even stuttered when speaking. However, Yin Shishir was not afraid at all. Since the Mu family had invited her, she did not have to worry about what they would do to her. On her way there, she gave Mu Yaja a call, but it was answered by Minyu. He told her that the chairman was in a meeting and could not take the call for the time being, so he asked her what was the matter. Yin Shishir smiled and said, "Tell him to go straight to the Mu residence after work. I'll wait for him there." Okay. It seemed that Mu Yaja still did not know about this. Was Mu Linfeng trying to bewitch her? However, she was not worried. Apart from some of the more senior elders present, there were also some unfamiliar but young faces. Yin Shishir immediately saw the young man sitting upright beside Mu Shumin. From his face, The man looked young and was in his 20s. From his facial features, she could vaguely make out some resemblance to Mu Yaja, especially his eyes and nose, which were very similar. Although they were not exactly the same, they were at least 50% similar. Speaking of which, genes were really interesting things. Although Mu Yichen's facial features were very similar to Mu Yaja's, the aura he exuded was not at all comparable to Mu Yaja's arrogant aura. Although he had outstanding looks and extraordinary heroic spirit, he was not inferior when compared to Mu Yaja. It was no wonder that Mu Yinqing had always been lackluster in the Mu family. Standing beside Mu Yaja, he could only serve as a foil. Or rather, he could not even be considered a foil. Since the last time he had a deep talk with Mu Shumin, Mu Yinqing had quickly gained Mu Linfeng's trust and approval. Mu Linfeng's request for him was very simple. It was not impossible for him to help him ascend to the position. But after that, whether it was the real power of Dishing Financial Group or the executive power of the Mu Corporation, all must be in his hands. As for him, on the surface, he had become the new patriarch of the Mu clan. But in reality, he was nothing more than a puppet. However, Mu Yinqing was happy to see it happen. In fact, compared to Mu Yaja, he was not that capable and capable. He was just a facade. After becoming the head of the family, he did not have the confidence to guarantee that the Mu Corporation could surpass Mu Yaja under his management and become a more powerful business tyrant. However, since Mu Linfeng wanted to take back his real power, then he would hand it over to him. Why wouldn't he do it? At least, he was still the head of the family in name. Even if it was an empty shell, so what? He only needed to be responsible for enjoying the glory, wealth, and vanity that came with being the head of the family. That was enough. He could enjoy the power of being the head of the family and cast aside his responsibilities. How could there be such a good thing in the world? Chapter 2099. Just this title alone was enough for him to fight for it like a moth to a flame. However, Mu Linfeng had also given him a warning in advance. It didn't mean that he could become the family head immediately after agreeing to it. Mu Linfeng still thought highly of his capable nephew, Mu Yaja. Hence, he called Yun Shishir over to show her who was in charge. If Mu Yaja knew how to repent and was willing to give up this woman for the sake of the family head's position, then he might as well give him another chance. After all, an outstanding talent like Mu Yaja was hard to come by in the entire Mu family. Forcing him to give up his position was bound to take some risks. Now that he was old, he could no longer afford to waste such energy or take such a huge risk. Hence, he found Yun Shishir for one last negotiation, which could be considered a showdown between the two parties. At this thought, Mu Linfeng took a sip of tea and went straight to the point without exchanging pleasantries. I hope that you can leave Yaja. Yun Shishir wasn't surprised by his straightforwardness. On the way here, she had already thought of countless possibilities, including this one. Yun Shishir narrowed her eyes, but didn't reply immediately. Instead, she calmly waited to see what this old man had up his sleeve. Mu Linfeng was a little surprised that she could keep her composure. After a moment of doubt in his eyes, he spoke again. Miss Yin, no matter what condition you have, as long as it's not too overboard, we can agree to it. However, I want you to know that Yaja is a very outstanding child. He was handpicked from the many descendants of the Mu family to be able to become the family head. I don't think you know how much he has sacrificed to be able to sit in this position. I don't want to sacrifice my precious nephew's bright future because of you. First of all, I want you to understand that no matter what happens, the Mu family will never acknowledge you. There's no room for you to be the Mu family's young mistress. Don't even think that the Mu family's door will open for you one day. To put it bluntly, I don't think you're worthy of Yaja. Not worthy? Yun Shishir found it very interesting and laughed. How am I not worthy? As soon as she finished speaking, the crowd immediately laughed mockingly. Mu Shumin, who was standing at the side, replied sarcastically, I'd like to ask you, in what way are you worthy of Yaja? Marriage was decided by the parents and the matchmaker. The Mu family didn't have such an old-fashioned tradition. But no matter how bad it was, they still had to pay attention to the fact that the two families were of equal social status. Ask yourself honestly, are you worthy of our Yaja? Yun Shishir didn't get angry. Instead, She smiled and didn't say anything. Yin Shishir could only think of one thing about Mu Linfeng: prejudice and arrogance. These people from a Mu family had always looked at her through color glasses. However, she had always been fearless. After all, she had chosen Mu Yaja, so she had decided to bear the burden of worldly judgment. Therefore, even if these insults were harsh, she remained indifferent. There was no other reason. After all, which rational person would take others' prejudiced words to heart? Chapter 2100. Mu Linfeng pondered for a moment before he said slowly, "We've already investigated your background. Your mother, Mu Qingcheng, was an adopted daughter that old master brought back to the Mu family. When she was young, she was a singer at the capital's nightclub. I heard that your biological father is from the Gong family. We acknowledge that, but don't think that you can climb up the social ladder just because you're from the Gong family. Moreover, you're just an illegitimate daughter. You've never been recognized by the Gong family, let alone be compatible with the Mu family. It's fine if you're not from the same family. The problem is that your background is dirty. If word gets out, you'll only become a laughingstock. The Mu family can't afford to lose face like this. A century-old family's reputation will be ruined because of someone like you." Yin Shishir sneered. "You're wrong about one thing. I have nothing to do with the Gong family." Mu Linfeng raised his eyebrows in surprise. He had thought that this woman would covet power and wealth and use the Gong family's background to take advantage of it. However, not only did she not take advantage of it, but she was also eager to sever all ties with the Gong family. For a moment, he could not understand her. Yin Shishir did not know what he was thinking. She only asked coldly, "Also, what do you mean by dirty? What's wrong with my background?" "You gave birth at the age of 18. Mu Shumin snorted and continued, "You're a girl who doesn't know how to keep yourself clean. You became a surrogate mother at the age of 18 for money. You got pregnant before marriage and gave birth to 2 children. Even if you did it because of the Mu family, what will people say if word gets out? The daughter-in-law of the Mu family was born a commoner and got pregnant before marriage. People will only look down on her. Moreover, the reason why you chose to be a surrogate was because of the generous remuneration. Think about it. If your employer wasn't the Mu family but someone else, you would have done it without hesitation. It's just a coincidence, but that's not an excuse for you." This was what Mu Shumin had been brooding over. What if the Mu family hadn't asked for a surrogate? If it was the Gu family or any other family, as long as they were willing to pay, she would agree without hesitation. The Mu family will never welcome a woman who only cares about money. However, there was another reason that she was most wary of. Mu Shumin continued, "Moreover, I suspect that your so-called surrogacy is just a ploy. In order to climb up the social ladder, you're playing hard to get. First, you're using the surrogacy method to hide the Mu family's flesh and blood. When the child grows up, she's delusional to think that she can marry into a rich family because of her son. This is something that the Mu family will never admit. The Mu family will acknowledge those 2 children, but it's impossible for you to step into our family." Mu Linfeng had already laid his cards on the table. The child could be recognized. In other words, as long as Yu was willing, she could enter the Mu family anytime and anywhere, change her name, and become a real member of the Mu family. She, on the other hand, would never be able to cross this threshold in her lifetime. Mu Linfeng had always been prejudiced against her. He thought that the reason why she was with Mu Yaja was because she coveted his background as the head of the Mu family. Chapter 2101. This was a position that many women would fight for, but it was difficult for them to achieve. She had only relied on her 2 children. As a mother, her status was elevated because of her children. Yet, she had easily obtained this glorious title. How could these people be balanced? Yin Shishir clenched her fists tightly. She was enduring it. She wanted to know what kind of prejudice the Mu family had against her. She wanted to know what kind of colored glasses these people were using to observe her, figure her out, and criticize her silently. Seeing that she was not speaking, Mu Shumin thought that she was feeling guilty. He added fuel to the fire. "Let's not talk about other things. Just your current status, an actress? Huh. How many good people can there be in the entertainment industry today? Now, to put it nicely, you can say that you're an idol, a celebrity, or a queen. In ancient times, you'd be a lowly actress with no status at all. An actress wanting to enter a rich family is simply wishful thinking. When Mu Yinqing heard this, he frowned and couldn't help but ask, "Auntie, she's an actress?" "Yes. Didn't she star in a movie not long ago?" The box office was very high. Mu Yinqing shook his head and said sarcastically, "She can't be an actress. The Mu family doesn't welcome actresses. How can any woman in the entertainment industry be clean?" I heard that. The female celebrities in the entertainment industry, no matter how untainted and pure they looked on the surface, were actually unrestrained in private. No matter what status they have, as long as they offer a high enough price, they can sleep with them for a night. That's why they say that women in the entertainment industry are dirty. How clean can they be when they're in such a big vat of corruption? Exactly. Only those nouveau riches would marry a woman in the entertainment industry. Who knows how many tricks these women have gone through? Those nouveau riches think that marrying a famous celebrity can increase their family's reputation. They're not afraid of being laughed at if word gets out. Who knows? These nouveau riches might have become brothers-in-law after marrying a celebrity. This is also the reason why these people will never be able to integrate into the upper-class society. In fact, the real rich don't care about actresses at all. It was only more than 10 years ago that such a trend took place. Nowadays, we still have to pay attention to matching families. Women have to be virtuous, gentle, virtuous, and knowledgeable. The Mu family doesn't need to talk about being well-matched in terms of social status. After all, strictly speaking, there aren't any families in the capital who can match up to the Mu family in terms of social status. I still hope that Yaja can find someone with a good family background. She doesn't need to be rich. Even if she's from a scholarly family, marrying a lady from a prestigious family would be a good choice. Exactly. Yaja is such an outstanding child. How can he be ruined by such an ill-intentioned lady? There was a burst of whispering. Yin Shishir sat expressionlessly in her seat as she listened to those harsh words. Those disdainful looks were like sharp knives landing on her body, piercing her skin. Vicious words hurt the cold of June. These words were not false at all. Yin Shishir narrowed her eyes, and the corners of her lips curled up slightly. She moved slightly and sat up a little straighter. The moment she moved, everyone's eyes immediately focused on her. Yin Shishir scanned her surroundings and casually said, "I think you all have misunderstood something." Mu Linfeng was stunned. "What do you mean?" Chapter 2102. Mu Linfeng was taken aback, unable to make sense of her. Yin Shishir suddenly raised her head. With a pair of resolute eyes, she stood up abruptly and walked toward Mu Linfeng. She stopped 3 meters away from him. Her gaze was indifferent as she said coldly, "Mr. Mu, allow me to be frank. Even if you beg me to enter the Mu family, I may not be willing to do so." Yin Shishir's back was straight. Her chin was slightly raised, but she did not appear arrogant. Her posture was like a lotus in the mud, not allowing anyone to blaspheme her. "From the moment you opened your mouth, you seem to have determined that I'm a beggar. You seem to think that your nephew and I are together with you only because of his background and wealth. Uncle Mu, you must be joking, since you said that I'm a scheming woman. Then if I'm really so shrewd and ambitious, I can say that none of you can stop me if I want to enter this place." Yin Shishir paused and swept a glance at the astonished crowd. Then she slowly said, "But I don't care even if you beg me to enter this place. Do you think that I covet the Mu family's wealth? I'm sorry, I really don't care for it. Sour grapes when you can't eat them." Mu Shumin jabbed. Clearly, he was infuriated by her words. "This person, your words are too extreme. That's not good, is it?" Yin Shishir turned to look at her and said sarcastically, "A narrow-minded person will be biased no matter what she sees." In other words, a person with a dark mind will not see any good in anything no matter how beautiful it is. Yaja is the person I love deeply. I chose to be with him because of him, and it has nothing to do with anything else. If you insist on judging me like this, I can't do anything about it. After all, summer insect can't talk about ice. You keep belittling actors and celebrities, but I feel that your qualities may not be comparable to those celebrities. At the very least, they rely on their own abilities to make a living in the entertainment industry. Even if some people use unspoken rules to gain fame, isn't it still a matter of one willing to be beaten and the other willing to be beaten? At the very least, whether it's mentally or physically, they have paid the price to get to where they are today. What about you? You're just blessed by the heavens. You're born a little better, but you don't have to be so arrogant and humiliate others, do you? Forgive me for being blunt, but you're, at most, lucky sperm. What else can you bring except for your reincarnation? In other words, I still think that you people are like beggars. You don't have any real ability, but you are the parasites of the family. Ask yourselves, when you're pointing fingers at others, at the same time, have you contributed to the family? Her words were truly shocking. What do you mean, lucky sperm? What do you mean, parasites? Listen. How the Mu Abdo you to say such unconventional words too? That was to two of Mu, two of him. Of course, Mu, of course. Of that of Yun, of her. Chapter 2103. Mu Shu Min's chest was filled with anger. She glared at her fiercely and sneered. What shame could she have? A woman who uses her body to get money. What shame can she have? Yin Sure narrowed her eyes, but she was not afraid. Instead, she mocked. Please don't use my surrogacy as a moral blackmail. First, I didn't steal. Second, I didn't rob. And third, I didn't interfere in the family. I only used my body as the price in exchange for the reward I won. I don't think that this is shameful. What's shameful is that everyone here casually slandered others because of power. She clenched her fists and trembled all over as she said this. This matter had always been a scar on her heart. Every time it was mentioned, it was undoubtedly unraveling that layer of scab and rubbing salt on the wound. For a long time, the wound had already festered and festered. But now, she did not care at all. She might as well tear the scar open and let the pus flow out. This way, it would have a chance to heal again. You! Mu Shu Min was unable to restrain her anger. She suddenly stood up and pointed at her angrily. Ridiculous! Woman, you're simply absurd and unreasonable. Yin Sure retorted. You're the ones who are unreasonable. Mu Linfeng slammed the table and said angrily, All of you, shut up. For a moment, the main hall was silent. Everyone kept quiet and did not say a word. Mu Linfeng turned his head and looked at her thoughtfully. Suddenly, he said slowly, Yin Sure, I invited you here not to listen to your nonsense. Everyone's fate is determined by the heavens. There's nothing wrong with this. But the continuation of a family is not determined by fate. In this family, there are indeed vermin, like you said, and there are also people who fail to live up to expectations. But you have to remember one thing. Not everyone in the family is useless. If they didn't do anything, a family like the Mu family wouldn't have been able to prosper for 100 years. The reason why the Mu family has been strong for 100 years at least shows that there are still many capable people in the family. This is not something that you can casually judge. I'm not the one who's making such presumptuous judgments. Yin Sure interrupted him. Compared to the man's fury, she was exceptionally calm. Her serene expression was like the surface of a lake. There was not the slightest ripple in it. She was calm and composed. Have you forgotten? Just now, who was the one who kept saying that he was judging others with a prejudiced mindset? Oh, only the officials are allowed to set fires, but the common people are not allowed to light lamps. Just because you think you're superior, you feel that everyone here is superior to me. No matter what you say about me, I have to accept it, but I can't judge you. From what I see, you guys are clearly taking advantage of your seniority and disrespecting your elders. Don't think that just because you are an elder, you can criticize and humiliate your juniors without any scruples. In this world, what matters is reason, not seniority. You guys are the ones who are being unreasonable. Girl, you really have a sharp tongue. Mu Shu Min could not hold it in any longer and scolded angrily. He didn't know why she was so talkative. Chapter 2104. I'm just being reasonable and stating the facts. You guys have no basis at all, and you're just using the fact that you have a sharp tongue. In my opinion, no matter how wealthy a family is, there's no lack of uncultured scum. If you ask me, I don't know where your sense of superiority comes from. In terms of upbringing and etiquette, the Mu family gives me the feeling that they're just putting on a show. The Mu family has indeed prospered for 100 years and can be considered a prestigious aristocrat. However, wealth has been passed down for 100 years, but other things can't be, right? You guys have thrown away all the rules and etiquette of the elder ancestor. What's left behind are just old dregs. As the saying goes, don't do unto others what you don't want done unto you. How can you restrain others when you can't do it yourselves? Don't you think this is ridiculous? If you want others to respect you, you have to respect others first. Don't you understand such basic upbringing? Yin Shishir's tone was calm and even. She had the aura of a scholar who had a verbal battle with a group of scholars. There were so many people present, but none of them could stand up to refute her. However, they were all furious. This little girl's mouth was so sharp. In just a few words, she had ridiculed them. The problem was that they didn't know how to refute her. Every word she said was sharp and incisive. Although it didn't sound pleasing to the ears, it was all reasonable, and they couldn't refute it. Mu Shumin was infuriated by her. Yin Shishir didn't have stage fright at all. She met her gaze with an icy gaze. Seeing that he couldn't win against her, Mu Shumin turned to Mu Linfeng and said, "Second brother, where does this little girl get so much nonsense from? Don't waste your breath on her. Just give her an ultimatum. I think she's refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit." Mu Linfeng tried to restrain himself. His entire body was tense, especially the muscles on his face. They were so stiff that he couldn't look straight at her. Even the corners of his lips were twitching nonstop. He kept reminding himself to maintain his poise. He couldn't let this unreasonable junior see him as a joke. He suppressed his anger and said calmly, "I don't care about that now. But Yin Shishir, I just want you to know one thing. If you still love him, let me give you a word of advice. You let go in time. I don't want to harm myself and him." "I don't understand what you're saying." Yin Shishir smiled elegantly and asked, "What do you mean by that? Just say it. There's no need to beat around the bush. I'm just a boor, so I can't understand your profound language." Mu Linfeng sneered. "I'll give you a sum of money. As for the amount, it's entirely up to you. However, there's a condition. You must divorce Yaja and not cause any trouble for the custody of the two children." As soon as he finished speaking, Yin Shishir was stunned for a moment. Suddenly, she found it inexplicably interesting and laughed. "What are you laughing at?" Mu Shumin flew into a rage out of humiliation. "We're talking about a serious matter with you. Why are you laughing for no reason? Give me a sum of money." Yin Shishir deliberated over this sentence, her eyes filled with mockery. "Can I decide the amount of money myself?" Seeing that she seemed to have taken the bait, Mu Linfeng was delighted. He immediately struck while the iron was hot and encouraged, "Of course. As long as you agree to my condition, I'll give you a check. You can fill in the amount yourself." Chapter 2105. "You seem to be very generous, huh? You're giving me a sum of money, so casually. It's no wonder people say that the Muse are rich and overbearing. From what I see now, it does make some sense." Yin Shishir suddenly sneered, and her tone took a sharp turn to be cold and refreshing. "But I never knew that a person's dignity can be clearly priced with money." Mu Shumin sneered coldly. Thinking that Yin Shishir was pretending to be reserved, he pretended to be kind and advised, "Actually, at this point, you don't have to be hypocritical with us anymore. Yin Shishir, don't put yourself on such a high pedestal like a white lotus. Who in this world doesn't love money? If you don't love money, why do you have to work so hard in the entertainment industry? Since second brother has promised to give you a sum of money, you can name a number. As long as it's within a reasonable range, we won't go back on our word. With this sum of money, do you still need to act? You just need to enjoy life to the fullest. From your point of view, let me give you a piece of advice. You're still young, and there are so many good men in the world. Why must you insist on pursuing our Yaja?" Without mentioning anything else, Mu Shumin's persuasion was indeed very tempting. This reminded Yin Shishir of something. Mushi had once told her about a female singer group in Taiwan. One of the members dated the son of a gambling king for 2 years and was considered half a step into the rich family. However, their relationship was opposed by the entire family. Just as their relationship was being disrupted, the girl found out that she was pregnant, so she told her rich boyfriend about it. Her boyfriend listened to his mother's advice and told her that the child must be aborted. Even if the child was born, the family would not approve of it. However, the girl insisted on having her way. She was certain that as long as she gave birth to the child, even if it was for the sake of the child, it would definitely help her enter the rich family. She went abroad, secretly prepared for pregnancy, and gave birth to a girl. Just as she was harboring the beautiful dream of marrying into a rich family, her boyfriend's mother appeared. After dating for so long, this was the first time she had seen her boyfriend's mother. She was an arrogant lady. Although she was the fourth concubine of the family, she had been manipulating the family for so many years and had long since slapped the entire family. She had made it clear that no matter what tricks she used, she could forget about taking a single step into the family. However, since the child had already been born, the family would acknowledge the child and place the child in England to be raised. However, she had to break up with her son immediately. As compensation, she promised the girl a sky-high sum of hush money. Although this girl loved this man deeply, she was also disheartened by his heartlessness, so she agreed to this condition. Therefore, with her ability, it would be difficult for her to go against this family. This fourth aunt was too ruthless. She would threaten and bribe her. If she played any tricks, she would be directly banned without any mercy. Receiving the sky-high hush money wasn't too bad of a deal, so she gladly agreed. This seemed to be the method that the rich were good at. No matter what kind of woman, giving her a sum of money would solve all her problems. However, it was different for her. Chapter 2106. Yu Yu and Xiaoi Qin could not live without her. She, too, could not live without this child. She knew that she was as insignificant as an ant if she were to go against the Mu family with her own strength. However, she was not afraid even if she had to pay the price. Yun Shishir's lips curled into a smile. Suddenly, she found it hilarious and laughed out loud. "What are you laughing at?" "I'm laughing at your naivety." Yun Shishir seemed to want to provoke them on purpose. Hence, she said airily, "Do you think I'm interested in this little bit of money? You seem to be underestimating me. I'm sorry, but I don't agree to this condition." "You don't agree?" Mu Shumin's voice suddenly became louder. "Yun Shishir, must you be so selfish? Even if Yaja loses his position as the Mu family's head because of you, will you be satisfied with that? When that time comes, there'll be no room for regret. Why don't we each take a step back while we still have some feelings for each other?" "What do you mean by that?" Yun Shishir, who was sensitive enough to detect the peculiarity in this matter, raised a brow. "In fact, everyone in the Mu family is very disappointed with Yaja. We really can't figure out why he would reject a girl from a prestigious family and choose you instead. Moreover, it's really hard for us to understand that he got a marriage certificate with you behind our backs. We've unanimously decided that if this child is still stubborn and insists on marrying you, then we'll reconsider and choose a new candidate for the head of the family." Yin Shishir was stunned. Her eyes slowly narrowed, and at the end of her line of sight were hateful faces. Mu Yinqing, in particular, was smiling so smugly that the ambition in his eyes could not be concealed at all. Yin Shishir suddenly understood Mu Linfeng's intention in inviting her for a negotiation. Their ultimate goal was nothing more than to force her to abdicate. If she decided not to do as they wished, they would strip Mu Yaja of his position as the head of the family. They thought that if she truly loved this man, she would definitely let him go for his future. "If I don't leave him, you will force him to abdicate. Is that what you mean?" Yin Shishir asked coldly. "Huh, little girl, your mouth is a little fierce, but at least you're smart." Mu Shumin snorted coldly. "Say it. Tell us your decision." "Interesting. Don't you think it's inappropriate for you to ask me this question?" Yin Shishir glanced at her coldly. "Why don't you ask him directly? Isn't that more appropriate?" Mu Shumin had lost all her patience. She suddenly called her assistant over and asked for a checkbook. She picked up a pen and asked directly, "How much do you want? How much money do you want before you are willing to leave him?" Mu Shumin did not want to play games with her and asked directly. Yin Shishir gritted her teeth. Mu Shumin hated her stubbornness and was determined to humiliate her in the most humiliating way possible. 100 million. Is that enough? Madam, 100 million. Mu Shumin did not have the patience to listen to her and continued to raise the price. Before Yin Shishir could reply, a childish and cold child's voice was suddenly heard from the door. 100 million? Are you trying to dismiss a beggar? There was no emotion in the voice. It was a childish voice, but more than that, it was cold and heartless. Everyone was shocked and looked in the direction of the voice. Chapter 2107. Yu Yu and Xiao Chen had appeared at the door unknowingly. Behind them stood two men in black suits with stern expressions. Yu Yu was dressed in a black trench coat with his hands in his pockets. His expression was as cold as ice. Xiao Chen stood at the side with an equally furious expression. He clenched his fists tightly and glared at Mu Shumin with a terrifying gaze. Mu Chen, do you still know how to return to the Mu family? Mu Shumin snorted and taunted him. I thought you'd forgotten your place and acknowledged a thief as your mother. Since you're all here, have a seat. Mu Linfeng waved his hand and ordered. The servant immediately brought two stools over and said gently, Young masters, please have a seat. Mu Chen remained indifferent and unfathomable. The servant observed his expression. It was obvious that she had confused Xiao Chen and Yu Yu. She walked to Yu Yu and reached out to carry him to his seat. However, Yu Yu slapped her hand away violently. Smack! Don't touch me. It's dirty. The servant was forced to retreat to the side. Yu Yu lowered his gaze and glanced at the chair beside him before kicking it away expressionlessly. With a bang, the little guy's strength was incomparably terrifying under his rage, and he directly kicked over the chair that was as tall as him. Mu Linfeng was stunned for a moment before he was infuriated. He straightened his body and stared at the little fellow who was standing not far away from him in disbelief. He was clearly so small, but he seemed to be hiding an endless amount of energy. There was an ancient saying that went, a newborn calf is not afraid of a tiger. However, how was this child a newborn calf? He was clearly the king of beasts. He was like a newborn tiger cub. Even in such a big scene, he did not show any fear at all. Yin Shishir was also stunned. She had never seen such a terrifying Yu Yu before. In her impression, Yu Yu was a little more mature than the other children and was unusually steady. However, in front of her, he was always as gentle as water, like a refined little gentleman with an elegant temperament. But now there was a different aura on his body. It was a very dangerous and aggressive aura. He stood there without saying a word, but his terrifying aura didn't seem to lose in the slightest, even when facing off against a seasoned figure like Mu Linfeng. Since you put it this way, I have no intention of negotiating with you calmly. Yu Yu turned around gracefully and laughed disdainfully. If it weren't for Daddy's painstaking efforts over the years, I would have destroyed Mu Group long ago. Yin Shishir widened her eyes. It was hard to imagine that such arrogant words came from Yu Yu's little mouth, who only knew how to sweet-talk her. In her memory, Yu Yu's gentle smile and bright eyes looked at her as if they could speak. His little mouth opened and closed as if he could speak. Mommy, I want a hug. However, the image gradually shattered. She snapped out of her thoughts and saw Yu Yu's cold and hostile gaze. It was so real. Chapter 2108. Yu Yu, on the other hand, smirked mockingly. Old uncle, I see that you're getting on in years, so I have to remind you that I don't have the time to play house with you. Let's cut the crap and get straight to the point. Yu Yu. Yin Shishir was frightened out of her wits as she softly called out his name from the side. This child, what was going on? How did he follow her here? How did he know that she was at the Mu residence? Moreover, the moment he appeared, he exuded an imposing aura that was completely different from his usual self. A series of suspicions left her in a daze. It was only now that she regained her senses. Who would have thought that this child would dare to challenge Mu Linfeng? How daring! Yin Shishir knew very well that the little lad was defending her, but this was clearly not the time for that. The child was insensible, so she naturally had to stop him. She was afraid that trouble would come from his careless words, so she called out to him softly. This was not the way to protect one's shortcomings. Sooner or later, he would get into trouble. Yu turned and glanced at her. He walked to her side obediently and placed his little hand gently on her shoulder. His gaze instantly became as gentle as water. "What's wrong, Mommy? What's wrong?" His voice was so gentle that it could be squeezed out of it. Standing in front of her, he seemed to have returned to his usual docile self. He was as obedient as a puppy, wagging his little tail at her. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Yin Shirshir did not know whether to laugh or cry. She could not help but chide him. "How did you follow me here?" "Agent Lee brought me here." "Agent Lee?" Yin Shirshir's face was full of question marks. She clearly did not know what was going on. Lee Hanlon walked over and bent over slightly with a smile. "Hello, it's me. Do you still remember me?" "Principal." Yin Shirshir felt that the world had turned into a fantasy. "What's going on?" "It's a long story. President Yin will explain it to you personally later." Lee Hanlon comforted her. Yin Shirshir, on the other hand, was confused. Her thoughts were in a mess, and she only felt that the world was too chaotic. What was going on? "Mommy, don't worry. I won't mess around, at least for your sake. However, there's a limit to everything." Yu slowly turned around to face his uncle. His eyes were as cold as ice. "According to seniority, I should respectfully address you as second granduncle, shouldn't I?" Before he could finish his words, he was quickly interrupted. Child, you have no respect for your elders. You have no right to call me that." Mu Lin Feng was clearly infuriated, so his tone was naturally unpleasant. "Mu Lin Feng." Yu addressed him by name. Mu Lin Feng's eyes widened in shock. Before he could react, he heard the boy casually say, "You'd better pray that Daddy can secure his position as the family head. When a Mu family's power changes, if you insist on forcing me to abdicate, Daddy will be dead. The day Daddy abdicates will be the day the Mu family welcomes the end of the world." He had long been unhappy with the Mu family. If not for the fact that the Mu family was his father's painstaking effort over the years, he would have taken action long ago. These good-for-nothings from a Mu family were like frogs at the bottom of a well. Did they think that the Mu family's position in the capital was unshakable? Interesting. He did not mind using his actions to broaden their horizons. Chapter 2109. He had lived for half a century, but he had never seen such an arrogant child. However, this child was insensible. Did he know how to deal with it? Naturally, Mu Lin Feng did not take him seriously. Suddenly, a servant's voice was heard from outside the door. "Young Master Yaja is back." Before she could finish her words, the person was already there. After Mu Yaja's meeting, Minyu informed him that Yin Shirshir had called and asked him to return to the Mu residence as soon as possible after finishing his work. He was worried that something had happened and left a mess behind, so he rushed back after the meeting. Just as he stepped into the main hall, he saw a rather spectacular scene. With just a glance, he roughly knew what was going on. This was especially so when he saw Mu Yinqing's impatient and ambitious expression. It was obvious that he had secretly joined forces with Mu Shumin to hold a family meeting and was determined to start a bloodbath. He had long expected that Mu Yinqing would join forces with Mu Shumin to force him to abdicate, so he was already mentally prepared for it. He did not expect that Mu Yinqing would be so impatient as to gather all the elders in the family and wait for his arrival. The show would officially begin. "Daddy!" When Xiao Chen saw him, the coldness on his face disappeared in an instant, and he happily welcomed him. Mu Yaja carried him and walked to Yin Shirshir's side. With a smile on his face, he lowered his head and gently placed his large palm on her shoulder. However, such a small action instantly soothed all her uneasiness. His appearance was like the descent of a god, instantly wiping away all the worries and nervousness in her heart. Before this, even though she looked strong and forbearing, in reality, she felt isolated and helpless. A few minutes ago, you had also done the same to Mu Yaja. The father and son seemed to have telepathy. Even their small actions of comforting others were the same, and they had great chemistry. Yin Shirshir laughed inwardly, finding the tacit understanding between the father and son very interesting. "How long have you been here?" he asked. "Not long, not long." She whispered to him, "I'm fine. Don't worry." With the tacit understanding between them, there was no need for words. Even if it was just a look, they would immediately understand each other. Yun Shishir took Xiao Yiqin and held him in her arms. Mu Yaja turned around and looked at the crowd with an expressionless face. The corners of his mouth curved into a cold arc. Since everyone is here, why don't we lay everything out on the table? Mu Shumin quietly hinted. With Mu Yaja as the center, everyone took their seats one by one, forming a large semicircle around him as if they were having a scolding session. Mu Linfeng sucked in a deep breath of cold air. For a moment, Yu Yu's arrival had stirred up his originally calm state of mind. He opened his eyes and said casually, Yaja, since you're here, there are some things that I should talk to you about. What do you plan to do with this woman? He did not specifically specify, but everyone knew who this woman was referring to. Everyone looked at Yun Shishir. Mu Yaja glanced at her and turned his head away. I thought everyone understood what I meant. Chapter 21:10. Mu Yaja sneered and retorted, Why do I need your approval for the woman I've set my mind on? What a joke. Mu Shumin was at a loss for words. Even though he was used to Mu Yaja's arrogant attitude, he was still deeply dissatisfied and frustrated. Yaja, you're not young anymore. As a man, no matter how promiscuous you are outside, the woman you bring into the family should at least be from a reputable family, even if she doesn't come from a well-matched family. I heard that this woman is in the entertainment industry, and she's obviously a femme fatale. I heard that you've offended many people and made many enemies because of her. With your status, you're destined to stand at the top of the Mu family. You can't mess around like this. You must know that this is a very dangerous thing for you. As the head of the Mu family, you should be thinking about how to strengthen the family and not make enemies for it. This is very detrimental to the family's future development. Haven't you considered this point? Ever since you became the head of the family, you've become more and more mischievous. You don't consider the consequences of your actions. This is a little too much. We've heard that you deliberately suppressed other families and banned those celebrities for this woman. But if you offend other families for such a scourge, don't you feel ashamed for the Mu family? Yaja, this child, has been rather negligent and lazy in the company's affairs recently. I heard that some time ago there was an engagement ceremony on the island, and it was quite a big event. She didn't know where the capital for this engagement came from. Could it be that he secretly transferred it from the company's account? The Mu family's current situation is very unfavorable. If you continue to mess around, you'll only plunge the Mu group into deep trouble. Although you've brought considerable results to the Mu group all these years, why don't you think about it? If you continue to be stubborn and neglect the company's development, you'll cast aside the family's interests. How can you do that? As soon as one person finished speaking, the other continued. As if they had agreed on this beforehand, they fought to criticize his crimes. Mu Yinxing, who was listening at the side, was both excited and gloating. He did not say a word throughout, but the smug look on his face was incomparably dazzling. Since you became the head of the family, you have indeed done many things inappropriately. If you insist on marrying this woman, then according to what the elders have said, everyone agrees that you are not suitable to sit in this position. In the end, Mu Linfeng concluded. Everyone's gazes fell on him. Mu Yaja didn't say a word and just listened silently. Even in the face of everyone's accusations, he didn't refute them. It was hard for him not to find it hard to believe. After Mu Linfeng's last sentence, he smirked mockingly and retorted, You've made such a big scene just to force me to abdicate. Everyone was dead silent. Not a sound could be heard. Mu Yinxing looked around. Just as he was feeling incomparably excited, he accidentally met Mu Yaja's cold and scrutinizing gaze. He shuddered and immediately sat down obediently, intimidated by the latter's scrutinizing gaze. This man exuded an extraordinary and terrifying aura. He was full of deterrence and dignity. Chapter 21:11. One of them said slowly, We have no intention of forcing you to give up your position. The position of the head of the household is supposed to be held by an outstanding member of the family. We chose you because we valued your talent and ability. Second brother has always thought highly of you and thought that you were outstanding enough. Everyone has always agreed that you are qualified for this position. However, the series of events that happened after that changed our view of you. We originally wanted to dispel our support for you. However, in just one night, we don't know what methods you used to obtain the position of the head of the household. Old Master is old, so it's inevitable for him to be muddle-headed. However, we will accept this muddle-headed debt for the time being. It's just that you have really disappointed everyone in the family for so long. After considering all of the above, if you continue to be stubborn, don't blame us for being heartless. You wanted to give up my position? Ha, what a stubborn word. Muyaja stood up gracefully with both hands in his trouser pockets. His posture was tall and straight, and his noble aura was dazzling. His gaze swept around lightly, and he asked casually, "Then, who is the candidate to replace me?" Suddenly, his gaze fell on Mu Yinqing, and the corners of his lips curled up. Mu Yinqing? Brother. Mu Yinqing felt uncomfortable under his sharp and threatening gaze. Naturally, he couldn't reveal his ambition in front of everyone, so he could only pretend to be kind and persuade him hypocritically. "Brother, are you trying to kill me by saying that?" Listen to Yinqing's advice. Cut off all ties with this woman and stop interacting with her. You are the head of the Mu family. What awaits you is a bright future. There are so many outstanding women for you to choose from. So why did you choose this woman? If you ask me, I don't have the ability to compete with you. The Mu group has indeed developed rapidly in your hands. I also hope that you will continue to be the head of the household. I advise you not to be too blinded by women. His words were so fake that it sounded like he was loosening the reins only to grasp them better. Mu Yinqing wasn't stupid. He also had his own cleverness. He was certain that Muyaja wouldn't really cut off all ties with this woman. That was why he said that. Mu Shumin said coquettishly, "Yinqing, don't belittle yourself. In my opinion, you're better than your brother. Fortunately, you're obedient and sensible enough. You won't do anything that makes things difficult for us." Before Mu Yinqing could respond, Muyaja nodded with a smile and said, "Yes, she's obedient enough, so she could be manipulated by others, right?" The main hall suddenly fell silent. Awkwardness flashed across Mu Linfeng and Mu Shumin's faces without exception. The others also felt greatly embarrassed and lowered their heads, not knowing what to say. Muyaja continued, "I think that the patriarch you are looking forward to is not someone who is very capable, but he must be well-behaved, obedient, and know when to advance and retreat. Once he ascended to the top, he could also hand over his authority and be at the mercy of others. When it was time to retreat, he knew to make way. What you want is a puppet, not a helmsman, isn't that right?" "Brother, what nonsense are you talking about?" Mu Yinqing pretended to be aggrieved and retorted, "Don't deliberately distort the good intentions of the elders." His words had more or less saved some of the elders' faces. Chapter 21:12. Kind intentions? Muyaja's voice suddenly turned frosty. "Out of kindness, you've set up such a trap for me and collectively want to force me to abdicate. I can't accept such kindness. Yaja, you guys have been plotting this for a long time, haven't you? I can see that you guys have put in a lot of effort." Muyaja's handsome face tensed up. His eyes were filled with anger and ruthlessness. "Since you guys have decided to force me to step down, what other choice do I have? As for those crimes, there's no need to worry about the pretext." "Yaja," Mu Linfeng shouted coldly, "you still have a chance. Take this chance to cut ties with this woman. We won't treat this matter as if it never happened and acknowledge your position as the head of the family. This is the only way we can be sure that you have no ulterior motives and can continue to lead the family business." Mu Shumin added, "Yaja, listen to my advice. No one is forcing you to step down from your position. However, what you've done has indeed disappointed everyone. Take this chance to cut ties with this woman, and we can treat today's matter as if it never happened." "That's right. Quickly cut ties with this woman." Everyone denounced and gave their orders sternly. Amidst the commotion, Muyaja suddenly tilted his head slightly. The moment his gaze landed on Yun Shishir's face, his eyes became as gentle as water. He slowly raised his left hand and gently covered it with his right hand. His fingertips gently caressed the diamond ring on his ring finger. It was the ring Yu Yu had given him during their engagement ceremony. He caressed it over and over again with a gentle gaze, as if he was caressing a one-of-a-kind treasure. The reverse side of the ring was embedded with a 20-point diamond. It symbolized that love was in the heart. Yu Yu and Xiao Chen looked at his actions and felt inexplicably uneasy. Yu Yu especially felt a little lost in the current situation. He did not know what his daddy would do. He vaguely recalled his daddy saying that he could give up the Mu group for his mommy's sake. Although his words sounded carefree, could he really do it? No man would be able to ignore the temptation of power and women and know how to choose between them. Was Daddy really willing to give up the Mu Empire and choose to be with Mommy? To him, the Mu group was not just a symbol of power and benefits. That was the result of more than 10 years of hard work. Was he really willing to give it up? When the time came for him to make a choice, could he really make it? Yin Shishir bit her lip and lowered her head. She clutched her clothes tightly and couldn't bear to look any longer. At this moment, she suddenly lost her confidence. He really had no confidence. Especially at a time like this, she was really afraid. The next second, he slowly took off the engagement ring and threw it at her, wanting to cut all ties with her. Mu Shumin and Mu Linfeng glared at him. At this moment, both of them were worried. Mu Linfeng hoped that Mu Yaja would continue to be in his position. He was willing to give this nephew, whom he had always thought highly of, another chance. However, Mu Shumin hoped that he could support Mu Yinqing to be in his position. Amidst the suffocating atmosphere, Mu Yaja suddenly let out a relieved smile as his hand moved past his ring finger. Chapter 21:13. He took off the ring on his thumb, which symbolized the highest authority in the Mu family. Then, he turned around and threw it at Mu Linfeng expressionlessly. Smack! The ring slipped off his body and fell to the ground. Yin Shishir heard the strange noise and looked up in shock. She could not see clearly what ring it was on the ground, but when her gaze landed on Mu Yaja's ring finger again, the engagement ring was still there. It was just like his promise to her back then. He would be her whole world and would never leave her. He actually gave up his position as the head of the household for her. Yin Shishir's eyes widened. For a moment, her eyes were filled with sparkling tears. She was so touched that she choked on her sobs. Yu Yu's initially stiff gaze softened. She looked at Xiao Chen and gently held his hand. At that moment, the two little fellows' palms were already sweaty. The crowd was curious about Yin Shishir and the two little fellows' reactions. Perhaps these capitalists did not know what true love was. Hence, when they saw the tenderness in the mother and children's eyes after Muyaja gave up his position as the head of the household for her, they were rather puzzled. They were even surprised. Muyaja remained standing tall. The surroundings suddenly quieted down. Everyone was intimidated by the astonishing aura emanating from his body. His handsome and tall figure stood there like a tall mountain, looking down at everyone from a high vantage point. He suddenly said in a low voice, "I've long gotten sick of this game. Forgive me for not playing with you. If any of you like it, feel free to continue." Muyaja turned around and opened his palm to Yin Shishir. "Come, let's go home. Let's go home." These 4 words gave her great warmth. Yin Shishir smiled with tears in her eyes and gave her hand to him. Their hands were tightly clasped together. The diamond ring on their ring fingers reflected each other's brilliance. It was holy and beautiful. Muyaja carried Yu Yu, while Yin Shishir held Xiao Chen's little hand. As he stood up, the chair made a scratching sound on the marble floor. It was as if sharp nails were scratching a blackboard. It made one's scalp tingle. He held her in his arms and strode away without any reluctance. His handsome back was cold and indifferent, and there was almost no emotion to be felt. Although he had been stripped of the title of the patriarch, he did not feel any sense of abjection. This position was given up by him. He did not even turn his head. Sodium Salt was extremely arrogant, looking down on everyone. Even if he was in the midst of scornful or humiliating gazes, it was difficult to diminish his kingly aura. Mu Linfeng glared at his back, his heart filled with complicated emotions. Not everyone present was like Mu Shumin, who could not wait for him to let go of this burden. Many of them hoped that Muyaja would know how to make a choice and continue to be the head of the household. However, he left just like that. He did not want the honorable position of the head of the household just like that. He was so decisive and straightforward. There was almost no hesitation. Could it be that he really did not like it? What a surprise. Back then, in order to sit in this position, this fellow had put in a lot of effort and sacrificed a lot to force those outstanding people to retreat and sit in this position. Therefore, some people felt that their hearts were empty after he left. Chapter 21:14. Mu Yinqing? Was he really going to take over the position? If this lad could be even half as good as Mu Yaja, the crowd would not have such complicated feelings. Mu Linfeng could not help but call out, Yaja! Mu Yaja's back paused. Yun Shishir glanced at him, only to see him turn around expressionlessly. He sneered and said, all these years in the Mu family, I've been cautious and did my best. Now that I've fallen to this state, I've saved your last bit of face. But don't forget that without me, the Mu family's empire will eventually become a wasteland. Today, I've walked out of this door. From this moment on, the survival of the Mu family no longer has anything to do with me. If the Mu family faces any difficulties in the future, don't crawl over to me with that pitiful face of yours. As soon as he finished speaking, his cold and oppressive gaze swept across everyone present. Finally, he retracted his gaze and left with Yun Shishir in his arms without looking back. Such heartless words had undoubtedly forced Mu Linfeng's last attempt to persuade him to stay back into his stomach. Resolute and domineering, this was him. Mu Linfeng seemed to have lost all his strength as he slumped on the chair. No one knew whether he was feeling happy or worried at this moment. Mu Yaja had left. At this moment, the Mu family's empire could be considered to have collapsed. He had gathered so many people and set up a Hongmen banquet, but it was never for such an outcome. At most, he wanted to threaten him. At least, even if Yun Shishir had to be a concubine, he would be happy to see it happen. But it was definitely not for such an outcome. Mu Shumin could not feel happy anymore. Mu Yaja's ruthless words before he left were a huge blow to her. She actually started to worry. With his ruthless methods, he would definitely not give up after leaving the Mu family. He would definitely use some tricks to trip up the Mu family. This was not the outcome she wanted to see. She had originally thought that forcing him to abdicate would be an extremely difficult task. A man with a strong desire for control like him would hold on tightly to power and not let go. However, they did not expect that a man who would do anything in the business world, who would do anything and everything, would rise to the top despite all the criticism and doubts. He used absolutely ruthless methods and almost swept away thousands of soldiers. He changed all the people in Mu Group. His ambition, his methods, and his boldness still made people feel a lingering fear in their hearts even until now. Such a man, for a woman, actually let go just like that. Isn't this too unbelievable? Until now, everyone felt as if they were in a dream, and it was difficult for them to regain their senses. It was hard to imagine that the current Mu Group had already lost its leader. Just a moment ago, everything that had changed had been overturned with just a single thought. Mu Yinqing was obviously very excited. He looked around and saw that everyone was silent. He then glanced at Mu Shumin and Mu Linfeng, who appeared to be indifferent. Hence, he reminded her indirectly, Aunt, since he has already stepped down from his position as the head of the household, then, next, it was time to announce the new head of the household. He was already itching to make a move, and his ambition was restless. He was just waiting for Mu Linfeng to wave his hand, and logically, he would be able to inherit the position of the head of the household in front of all the elders. Mu Shumin bit her lip and did not say a word. Mu Yinqing could not help but feel disappointed. What was she thinking? Hurry up and announce what's next? Didn't Annie agree? Chapter 21:15. What was he thinking? Hurry up and announce the next step? Didn't they agree that once Mu Yaja abdicated, it would be his turn to take over? Mu Yinqing looked impatient. Seeing that Mu Shumin did not say anything, he turned to look at Mu Linfeng. Second uncle, what should we do next? Someone at the side reacted and immediately suggested, that's right. Since Mu Yaja has abdicated, we should support a new candidate for the position of the family head. Following this person's suggestion, the others seemed to have recovered their spirits and continued. Second brother, you have the most seniority. Before this, you should have found a new candidate for the family head. That's right. I think second brother has a candidate in mind. Look, isn't Yinxing the best candidate? I heard that second brother intends to support Yinxing to take over. This is a good choice. Mu Yinxing listened to the flattery and puffed out his chest with a smug look on his face. He was full of ambition and was just waiting for Mu Linfeng to give the order so that he could take over the family head in a grand manner. This was the moment that he had been dreaming of all this time. Mu Shumin also reacted and said, Second brother, you decide on a candidate. Mu Linfeng, on the other hand, was feeling complicated and lost interest. He was still thinking about what had happened just now. No matter how he thought about it, he felt extremely regretful. This was not the outcome he wanted. Therefore, his attitude towards the suggestion of another family head was indifferent. He said indifferently, We'll talk about the family head's decision another day. I'm a little tired today. Upon hearing this, Mu Yinxing instantly wilted. His morale was low, and he bit his lip indignantly. Needless to say, he felt so wronged. He cast a helpless gaze on Mu Shumin. He wanted to say something, but he did not, hinting with his eyes. Was there a need for another day? It was rare for everyone to gather here. Now that everyone was here, why not take advantage of the situation and support him to take over the family head? Originally, since Mu Yaja had said such harsh words, it could be said that he had severed all ties with the Mu family. Even if he regretted it, it was too late to salvage the situation now. Since such a proud and aloof man had said such harsh words, he would definitely not come back. On the Mu family side, no one would lower themselves to beg him to come back. Today's situation had already been decided. Next, the matter of choosing a new patriarch could be said to be imminent. But at this juncture, what was the point of hesitating? Mu Yinxing could not wait any longer. After all, there might be some unforeseen changes after tonight. If there were any changes and another Cheng Yaojin appeared, then all his efforts would be in vain. Would it not be all for someone else's benefit? One had to know that the news hadn't spread yet. If this news were to spread throughout the Mu Jia, his peers would be eyeing him like a tiger watching its prey. How could Mu Yinxing restrain himself? He might as well take advantage of this situation and go with the flow. Before this, Mu Yinxing couldn't wait any longer. Taking advantage of Mu Yaja's meeting, he sneaked into the CEO's office. Sitting on the chair that symbolized the highest position, his heart was burning hot. He stroked the mahogany desk and thought comfortably that in the future, this place would become his world. All this while, he had been thinking about this place for a long time. Once he sat on it, it was like sitting on a dragon's throne. He hoped that he would be able to fulfill his wish one day. Chapter 21:16. Give me some time to think about this matter carefully. We can't be rash about the succession of the family head. There's no rush. With that, Mu Linfeng slowly stood up and left with a worried expression, leaning on his cane. That day, when Mu Shumin came to him and mentioned this matter, Mu Linfeng actually disapproved of Mu Yinxing. Although Mu Shumin agreed and supported Mu Yinxing, in Mu Linfeng's eyes, it was just a woman's view. He did not think that Mu Yinxing was qualified to succeed the family head. He did not have the ability or the responsibility to take on the position. The reason why he gathered everyone and called Mu Yinxing over today was to use him to provoke Mu Yaja. He hoped to make Mu Yaja aware of the crisis and let him know that he was not the only one who could take on the position of the family head. He was originally sure that this kid, despite his fierce mouth, would be able to distinguish the pros and cons clearly and would not make a mistake. However, later on, Mu Linfeng realized that Yun Shishir occupied such an important position in his heart. He was wrong, ridiculously wrong. In just one night, his chances of winning were gone. Without Mu Yaja, half of the Mu group had indeed collapsed. This time, it was his turn to feel uncomfortable. This brat was quite carefree, wasn't he? He was sure that without him, the Mu group would be in chaos. Others did not understand, but Mu Linfeng knew very well that the Mu group was going to experience a bloodbath in the coming days. Sigh, what a miscalculation. After Mu Linfeng left, Mu Yinxing forced himself to remain calm on the surface, but inside, he was angry and anxious. He originally thought that it would be his turn to take over the family head, but Mu Linfeng left just like that. What was he? He had schemed and plotted for so long. In the end, there wouldn't be any changes, right? He keenly sensed that Mu Linfeng was not satisfied with him and was obviously unwilling to hand over the family head position to him. Then, who did he want to support? Could it be that all his hard work was for naught? When Mu Shumin saw him suppressing his dissatisfaction and forbearance, she, too, felt a little guilty, so she secretly consoled him. Your second uncle hasn't adjusted his mentality properly. Once tonight is over, I'll ask him again and see if he has any plans for the next step. This matter can't be rushed. Even if he announces today that he will support you, the position won't be stable and won't be stable. There's no need to rush. Mu Yinxing felt wronged. Second uncle doesn't approve of me? Or do you think that I'm not qualified and not as outstanding as second brother? Yinxing, don't let your thoughts run wild. Especially at a time like this, we can't afford to be flustered. Okay, Aunt, I'll listen. Mu Yinxing took a step back and compromised. Mu Shumin smiled. After leaving the Mu residence, on the way home, Mu Yaja sat in the back seat with Yu in his arms. However, he did not seem to be in a good mood. From the beginning to the end, he looked out of the window and remained silent. Yin Shishir's heart sank when she saw this. He was definitely not in a good mood tonight. It was not that he was reluctant to part with her, but after all, he was giving up so many years of hard work. Naturally, he felt uncomfortable. She slowly placed her hand on the back of his hand. Chapter 21:17. Are you very sad? She asked softly, looking a little guilty. After all, it was because of her that things had turned out this way. She couldn't help but feel guilty. Yu and Xiaoyichen looked at each other and kept quiet. Mu Yaja said in a low voice, "Don't let your imagination run wild. I don't feel upset." Even though he was comforting her, Yin Shishir still felt a little lost. Yu suddenly said, "Daddy, you still have Mommy. You still have Xiaoyichen and me. We are your strongest supporters." It didn't matter if he didn't say anything, but the moment he spoke, Yin Shishir suddenly reacted. She suddenly turned her gaze and stared at him. She said darkly, Yu, I think you should be honest with Mommy." Yu tilted his head and deliberately acted cute. He looked confused and his gaze was blank. "Mommy, what do you want me to explain? What's going on today?" Today, Yu continued to act cute. He blinked his big, watery eyes as if he didn't understand her words. Yin Shishir snorted coldly and reached out to pinch his ear. "Wah!" Yu cried out pitifully, "Mommy! Mommy, let go. It hurts. Hurry up and tell me the truth. What do you mean by flattening Mu Corporation? Where did you get the confidence to say such bold words?" Xiao Yichin said leisurely, Yu, hurry up and tell me the truth. Otherwise, you will die in Mommy's hands tonight." Yu immediately asked Mu Yaja for help. Daddy, help me." Mu Yaja ignored him and said airily, "Be good and tell me the truth." He wasn't going to clean up his own mess. "Are you still thinking about asking for help?" Yin Shishir smiled and tightened her grip. Yu couldn't take it anymore. He said with tears in his eyes, "Mommy, it hurts. Calm down and listen to my explanation." "Okay." Yin Shishir let go of him and crossed her arms elegantly. She smiled calmly and said, "I'll give you a chance to explain." Sucking in a deep breath of cold air, Yu proceeded to explain his background in one breath. Of course, he omitted the background of the Hurricane Group. The reason why he avoided talking about this identity was because he didn't want to agitate her too much. Step by step, if he was too shaken, he was afraid that his mommy wouldn't be able to accept the truth. When he was 5 years old, he officially took over as the chief shareholder of Leji Holdings. When he became the CEO and appointed Li Hanlin as a special director, his net worth rose to more than 1 billion yuan. When Leji Holdings got listed, its market value was estimated to reach an unprecedented scale. After saying all this, Yu sighed. Although Leji Holdings may not be able to compete with the Mu Corporation, we won't let them do whatever they want to us. Mommy, I just want you to know that we are not that easy to bully. Yin Shishir was dumbfounded when she heard this. She stared blankly and didn't come back to her senses for a long time. Lizzie Holdings? Lizzie Holdings. Wasn't it the world's #1 toy supplier? She had seen the news that Lizzie Holdings was going to be listed, and it was reported on China Central News. She had always been passionate about Lizzie Holdings products. She bought most of the gifts for Yu Yu and Xiaoi Chen from Lizzie's flagship store. Chapter 2118. What, 5 years old? 5 years old. Now, he was the legal representative of Lizzie and owned a considerable amount of shares. Was she dreaming? When Yu Yu saw that Yun Shur was in a daze, he waved his hand curiously in front of her eyes. Mommy, what's wrong? Muyaja glanced at her from the corner of his eyes. He couldn't help but chuckle as he scratched her nose affectionately. Only then did she regain her senses. Still, she glanced at him in disbelief and muttered, I can't believe it. Yu Yu patted her shoulder comfortingly and said meaningfully, Mommy, you have to believe that anything is possible. I can't believe that you're my biological son. Yin Shur muttered the second half of her sentence. Yu Yu was dumbfounded. Yin Shur held Yu Yu's little face in her hands and looked at him from left to right. Then, she recalled how high-spirited Yu Yu was when he was at the Mu residence. He was arrogant, bold, and heroic. However, when she looked at the obedient and cute little boy in front of her, Yin Shur felt that the whole world was spinning. She couldn't believe it. Could she say that she didn't believe it? He dominated the toy market at 7 years old. He was only 7 years old. When she was 7 years old, she was still playing with mud with Xiao Jie. She couldn't believe that such a genius son had come from her womb. Wasn't there a saying called genetic mutation? Then why was Yu Yu the only one who had mutation, but Xiaoi Chen? He couldn't even do basic arithmetic. No, Xiaoi Chen was also very amazing. She had seen him carry a washing machine with her own eyes, yet he was able to carry it on his shoulders with such a small body. What kind of crazy pair did she give birth to? Xiaoi Chen looked at Yin Shur's stunned expression and laughed out loud. Ha ha! Yu, you scared Mommy. Ha ha! Yu said innocently. Mommy, I'm too smart. It's not my fault. Yin Shur tried her best to hold her head and closed her eyes tightly, signaling him to keep quiet. Baby, let Mommy calm down. Mommy can't digest what you've said for a while. Yes. Yin Shur suddenly thought of something and asked suspiciously, The agent you're talking about? The one you always thought was the principal. Headmasterly, Yin Shur's eyes widened. He's your director? Uh-huh. Yu crossed her arms and nodded. I'm also your personal assistant. No wonder. She had always thought that Li Hanlin was the principal of the kindergarten and that he cared for Yu so much because he liked him. Yin Shur's heart was still pounding. There were times when Yu would often express his annoyance towards Li Hanlin, but Li Hanlin would not take it to heart. Instead, Li Hanlin would tremble with fear. At that time, she was already confused. Now that she thought about it, that was just a subordinate's way of showing his respect to his superior. There were times when she thought that Yu's attitude towards Li Hanlin was very arrogant, but Li Hanlin still acted exceptionally magnanimous. Now that she thought about it, it was all because he was afraid that Yu would deduct his bonus as a subordinate. It was no wonder. Had there ever been a principal who cared so much about a student whom he had never met before? This kind of love seemed to have gone beyond logic. Now that she thought about it, Yin Shur suddenly felt as though she had been kept in the dark from the beginning. Chapter 2119. Yin Shur glared at him coldly. Suddenly, she pinched his face unhappily and said gloomily, Boy, how dare you lie to me and say that he is the principal of the kindergarten? How dare you lie to Mommy? Ouch, ouch, ouch. Yu hugged her hand and begged for mercy. Mommy, please spare me. Mommy, I was wrong. Yin Shur pretended to be angry and said, If it weren't for what happened today, I don't know when you would have come clean with me. Sob, sob, sob. Mommy, I was wrong. Please spare me, okay? Yu put his hands together and begged for mercy again and again. Xiaoi Chen couldn't help but snicker. You made Mommy angry. Who asked you to hide it from Mommy? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly felt a somewhat cold gaze fall on him. Xiaoi Chen slowly turned his eyes and saw Yin Shur looking at him coldly. She pursed her lips and said, Oh, so you knew about it too. You hid it from me with Yu. Without waiting for little Yi Chen's explanation, Yin Shishir's hand reached over and mercilessly pinched his little ear. Sob, 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 sob. Mommy, let me go. What did I do wrong? Xiao Yi Chen felt wronged and teared up. He felt that he had been implicated. Accomplice. Mommy, I didn't hide it from you on purpose. Yu asked me to hide it from you and not tell you. Yin Shishir looked at Yu and narrowed her eyes. Yu quickly begged for mercy and said, That's because I didn't want Mommy to worry. Yu broke free from her grip and held her hand instead. He placed his hand on the back of her hand, and the grievance on his face suddenly disappeared. It was replaced by a dazzling tenderness. Mommy, I know you're angry and worried. That's why I didn't dare to tell you the truth. No matter what my identity is, I'm still that sensible and obedient Yu by my mommy's side. That will never change. Mommy, I'm working hard to become stronger, by hook or by crook at all costs. I just want to protect you better and not let you be bullied by anyone. I've had enough of being weak, helpless, isolated, and bullied. Although some of the memories happened when I was very young, they were still deeply etched in my mind. I don't want such a nightmare to accompany you for the rest of your life. His words were incomparably sincere. Yu looked at her gently. Suddenly, she reached out her little hand and grabbed Muyaja's hand. She replaced herself and gently placed her hand on the back of Yin Shishir's hand. Then, he turned his head and exchanged a smile with Xiao Yi Chen. The two little fellows gently placed their little hands on her. In the future, let's never be separated again, okay? Before Yu could finish speaking, Yin Shishir's face was already covered in tears. She tried her best not to show her weak side in front of the little munchkin. She widened her eyes and tried in vain to force back her tears. But she couldn't help it. These simple words were so touching. She couldn't hold back her tears any longer. Initially, when this little fellow fearfully confessed his identity to her, Yin Shishir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She was obviously very angry, but she also felt a little heartache and helplessness. At the same time, she also felt a great sense of loss and defeat. So, Xiao Bao, who she had always doted on, was already such a formidable person. He was clearly still such a young child, but he was already able to hold up half the sky. And she, as his guardian, still relied on his protection at this crucial moment. Chapter 21:20. Yin Shishir did not feel good about it. Perhaps no mother would feel happy about this. Right now, her heart was filled with guilt, loneliness, and bitterness. With tears in her eyes, Yin Shishir hugged the two little munchkins and closed her eyes. From an angle where the two little munchkins could not see, she let her tears flow freely. She probably could not be considered a good mother. Muyaja's heart was also touched. There had never been a time when his heart was as hot as tonight. There had never been a time when he felt that the hearts of the four of them were so close. At this moment, he suddenly felt that he was like a tall mountain, towering and indestructible. Although he had stepped down as the head of the family, he did not regret it at all. He was no longer the person he used to be. Now, although he had lost the Mu group, he felt that he was strong and indestructible. He gently hugged the three of them and narrowed his eyes. Inadvertently, his gentle gaze was like the purest lake water, tender and moving. Tonight was destined to be a sleepless night. The Mu family's house was brightly lit. After Mu Linfeng left the banquet, Mu Shumin and Mu Yinqing left as well. However, the others did not leave. They sat down calmly and discussed the matter of the head of the family. Ever since Mu Yaja casually stepped down from his position, these elders and shareholders, who were initially gloating over the company's misfortune, became worried. Never would they have expected Mu Yaja to abdicate his responsibilities without looking back, all for the sake of a woman. This time, they were worried sick. Regarding the news of Mu Yaja stepping down as the head of the family, the next step was to launch a series of public relations. First, they had to issue an announcement letter to announce that Mu Yaja had stepped down as the CEO of Dishing Financial Group. Next, they would have to face the bombardment of the media. The public relations department would probably have to quickly set up alert and do a good job of public relations. Then, when the news was released, they would have to think of ways to calm the unrest and uneasiness caused by the change of power in the headquarters. After all, any change in power in a company would usually be announced in advance to give a precaution. For example, before Muyaja became the CEO, the headquarters of Mu Group issued an announcement 1 month in advance. Moreover, within this 1 month, all the handover work was carried out in an orderly manner. 1 month later, Muyaja took office. Even so, the Mu Group was still in an uproar. Firstly, Muyaja was only about 20 years old at that time. He was young and full of vigor. At that age, many men had yet to graduate from university, but he had already obtained a degree in finance. Moreover, with his overwhelming strength, he stood his ground against all opposition and ascended to the position of president. There were many people who were not convinced by him, not to mention the veterans of Dixing's shareholders' meeting. Even the ordinary employees at the headquarters shook their heads at the mention of this new president. Before Muyaja took over, Mu Sheng was the chairman and honorary CEO, while the deputy general manager was an external executive. However, all the power was still in his hands. With such a young face changing overnight, many people's hearts were pounding. They were afraid that the Mu Group would go downhill after the change. A generation's head. Chapter 21:21. Secondly, as the saying goes, a new broom sweeps clean. As soon as Muyaja took over, he set fire to the senior management. He kicked out a few good-for-nothings and cleaned up a few of the senior management who were idling around. He then supported new people to take over. That move caused panic among many people. During that period of time, the stock price of Mu Group was fluctuating. It fell again and again until it plunged by 4%. Don't underestimate that 4%. If it were any other company, they would have been on the verge of bankruptcy. Only a deep-rooted financial group, like the Mu Group, could barely stabilize the situation. However, just when everyone was worried about the future of Mu Group, Muyaja was invincible. Not only did he get rid of the hidden tumors in Mu Group, but he also issued new policies one after another. He carried out reforms swiftly and decisively. He bought up many potential bad assets. Under his operation, Mu Group quickly recovered and climbed to the top with an amazing momentum. How could people not be impressed by such a strategy? Everything felt like a dream. He was a peerless genius. Muyaja's business talent was definitely unique. However, now that they were back to this difficult time, the elders were worried. They did not even know how to explain it to the public. They did not even have to think about it. If they announced to the public that Muyaja was stepping down as the CEO, the stock price would definitely fall to the bottom. That would cause an immeasurable turmoil within the financial group. At the same time, who else could be the savior of Mu Group like Muyaja did in the past? In the entire Mu Group, they could not find another man with such talent and responsibility. As the saying went, the emperor would summon his ministers. However, all of this happened too suddenly. What they were more worried about was the fact that Muyaja had spouted such harsh words today. Given his means, there was no telling what kind of crazy things he would do after leaving the Mu family. He had been in Mu Group for so long. He knew every move of Mu Group like the back of his hand. In other words, it was not impossible for them to empty out Mu Group without anyone knowing. No one knew the operations of the consortium better than Muyaja. Moreover, Muyaja had nurtured a group of thousands of people in the Mu Group. Most of them were the cream of the crop from famous universities such as the United States and the United Kingdom. Once Muyaja left, this group of people would definitely leave with him. This was undoubtedly the loss of the Mu Group's left and right arms. They were loyal to him. Muyaja was right. Without him, the Mu family would truly be in ruins. They would have nothing left. They didn't even dare to imagine what kind of dark day the stock market would experience if Mu Group made an announcement the next day. It wasn't hard to imagine that hundreds of billions of dollars would evaporate. This is too sudden. What do you all think? What opinion can I have? I thought tonight was just a simple family meeting. I didn't expect it to turn out like this. What bad luck. Chapter 21:22. Yaja, that rascal. So many people are scrambling for the position of the family head, and he just threw it away like that. How carefree and unrestrained. Could it be that he really prefers the beauty over the power? Wealth, power, and wealth. He gave them up just like that. Doesn't he have any reluctance? Everyone sighed and shook their heads. One of them said helplessly, "There's no point in saying more now that things have come to this. We'll hold a shareholders meeting at 7 a.m. tomorrow to discuss the next steps. Shifeng will follow up on everything." Understood. Fifth uncle. The public relations department must be on high alert. We'll hire a senior public relations consultant to be in charge of all media matters. Yes, I'll make the arrangements right away. Also, the media and legal departments must be on high alert. We'll strictly curb the rumors online. If necessary, we'll use legal means. Yes, sir. Tonight was destined to be a sleepless night. Yu and Xiao Chen returned home. While Yin Shishir was busy, Xiao Chen pulled Yu aside and asked seriously, "Don't you intend to come clean with Mommy? Haven't I already explained it to her?" Yu, on the other hand, was baffled. Xiao Chen sighed. "What about the Hurricane Group?" "About you and the Hurricane Group, the toys you designed for the Davai project, and your involvement in the military and maritime matters. Don't you intend to come clean with Mommy?" Yu's expression suddenly turned solemn. He shook his head and said helplessly, "I don't have the courage to do that. Are you worried that Mommy will blame you?" Yu smiled weakly, looking a little tired. "No, I'm worried that she'll be disappointed in me and think that I'm a bad kid who commits all kinds of evil." Xiao Yichen retorted in his heart. "Think? Isn't that the truth?" Yu was stunned. Then his eyebrows twitched uncontrollably. "Mu Yichen, is he deliberately sabotaging me?" Xiao Yichen sighed as well. "I also think that it's better for you to hide this from Mommy for now. After all, she might not believe you if you tell her about it, and she'll worry about you." Unlike his usual wide-eyed self, Xiao Yichen was surprisingly calm right now. He was thoughtful and considerate. He had considered all the things that Yu was worried about. Even Yu was taken aback by his brother's behavior. "Me? Are you Mu Yichen?" Feeling suspicious, Yu tore at the man's face. "Tell me, who are you? I don't believe that you're that idiot." Mu Yichen grabbed his hand with a mournful look and said aggrievedly, "I'm clearly analyzing the matter with you. Don't mess around." At this moment, Mu Yichen finally showed his responsibility and boldness as an older brother. Yu snickered and said, "You're finally acting like an older brother." Mu Yichen blushed and cleared his throat awkwardly. "I'm your older brother. I couldn't tell. You're usually a punching bag." Mu Yichen rolled his eyes internally. "Isn't that because you're always bullying me?" "I'm just giving in to you a little." Yu suddenly stopped smiling and said calmly, "Don't worry. I'll explain it to her when the time is right. It's just that I haven't thought of how to explain it to her yet." Shipping, smuggling, military munitions, war. Chapter 21-23. Just imagining Mommy's expression, they all felt crazy. After receiving the news, Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shun quickly rushed to Shawnee Walk. In the living room, Yin Shishir served tea and heard Lu Jinyu's shocked voice. "Boss, are you determined to do this?" Jiang Shun also said in disbelief, "We're halfway through the plan. Now that boss has stepped down as the CEO, it may be a big challenge for the expansion of the Xingyu Corporation." "Boss, you're crazy." As soon as he finished speaking, the two of them heard footsteps. They turned their heads and saw Yun Shishir holding the brewed tea, standing there in a daze, looking very uneasy. They looked at each other and immediately felt extremely guilty. They comforted her and said, "Sister-in-law, don't think too much. We don't mean what you think. It's okay." Yin Shishir put the teacup on the table thoughtfully and was about to leave. Mu Yaja suddenly held her hand. "Huh?" She turned around blankly, only to see him smiling deeply and comforting her gently. "Don't think too much, okay?" "Okay." Yin Shishir shook her head. "Don't worry. You guys continue to talk. I'll go to the garden to trim the flowers." With that, she hurried to the back garden. Mu Yaja's smile disappeared. He turned around and glanced at them coldly with a dangerous gaze. Jiang Shin knew that he had said something wrong and bit his lip guiltily. "What happened tonight was very sudden. I didn't have time to worry about it. The Mu Corporation can't tolerate me anymore. Or some people with ulterior motives have long wanted to pull me down from this position. They haven't made a move on me because I'm still useful. Tonight, they arranged such a Hongmin banquet for me because some people with ulterior motives want to use a few seniors and shareholders to kick me out. As for the others, they just want to suppress my momentum. However, I've turned the tables on them and stepped down as the head of the family. They must be caught off guard and confused. Lu Jinyu immediately understood what Mu Yaja meant. As a matter of fact, Mu Linfeng had long harbored such thoughts. As a chess piece, he was naturally dissatisfied with the fact that the man had his own thoughts and opinions. He wholeheartedly wanted to find a suitable replacement for the patriarch's position. Perhaps he had already secretly cultivated some strength. This old man had a good plan. He wanted to make use of Mu Yaja to strengthen the Mu group. In the end, he would kick Mu Yaja out of the game and support another successor. In that case, wouldn't he be doing all the work for someone else? As for Mu Shumin, her thoughts were much simpler. She just didn't like Mu Yaja and thought that it would be best to kick him out. Even if it was difficult to shake his position, it would be good to use this meeting to dampen his spirit. Mu Yaja could tell that Mu Yinqing had gained Mu Shumin's trust. Mu Shumin wholeheartedly wanted to support this fellow to take the patriarch's position. As for the others, some were purely there to watch the show, while others were dissatisfied with his various actions and wanted to suppress his momentum. However, he had already been defeated and stepped down as the family head in front of everyone. As a result, some people were happy while others were sad. Most of the people who were happy were Mu Yinqing and Mu Shumin. They originally thought that it would be difficult to get rid of this thorn in their flesh, but they did not expect him to take the initiative to step down. Chapter 21-24. The one who was worried was Mu Linfeng. He had yet to find an outstanding successor. Now that he suddenly announced his resignation, he was immediately caught off guard. He had always been the one running the Mu group. Now that he suddenly withdrew, there was no room for any mental preparation. No matter who came halfway, it would definitely be a mess. The more this happened, the more opportunities the Mu group had to take advantage of. He beat them at their own game and took advantage of the situation. It could be said that he was extremely ruthless. There was no way out or defense at all. In this way, they would be given many opportunities. Lu Jinyu was suddenly enlightened. When he thought about it, he was secretly amazed by Mu Yaja's shrewdness. Rather than shrewdness, it was better to say that he was scheming. He actually had such a shrewd foresight. But then again, as early as 3 years ago, he had devoted most of his energy to the Xingyu Financial Group. Since then, Big Boss had already been playing a very big game of chess. Poor Mu Yaja. Until now, he was still in the dark and was still delusional about making use of him. Unexpectedly, he had already been reduced to a chess piece in Mu Yaja's hands. Jiang Shun was also quite excited when he heard this. He was waiting for the next step to be bold and decisive. He was ready to take down the Mu group in one go. Mu Yaja held the teacup in his hand and smiled. The ambition and sharpness in his eyes were already indescribable. It was late at night. Yin Shishir had just made the bed when Mu Yaja pushed the door open and walked in after taking a shower. Hearing her busy voice, he quietly walked over and wrapped his arms around her waist from behind. He whispered in her ear, "What are you busy with?" Yin Shishir was so busy with the things at hand that she did not notice when he walked in at all. She was shocked. When she came back to her senses, she complained, "Make the bed. The weather is cold. The quilt used to be warm." Mu Yaja was not in the mood to listen to what she said. At this moment, he leaned over slightly and gently kissed her earlobe. They had not been intimate for many days, so he kissed her a little hurriedly. However, he was very focused and had no other thoughts. Yin Shishir laughed and pushed him away, but he was not in the mood to care. Instead, he kissed her deeper and deeper. He twisted her body and hugged her waist. The heat of his palm was transmitted from her waist to her waist. His big hand slowly reached under her clothes and explored. "Hey," Yin Shishir said coquettishly, "the two little guys haven't slept yet." She had originally promised to go to the two little guys' room and read them a bedtime story after she made the quilt. This was basically her homework before going to bed every night, and she never missed a beat. Mu Yaja, however, snorted in dissatisfaction. "Ignore them. I don't care. Are you going to coax them to sleep?" Yin Shishir was amused. She was half joking and half serious. "It's fine as long as you coax me." When his words fell, it was so ambiguous that it made her heart immediately thump, thump, thump. When she pushed him away just now, she only let out a soft moan. He then unwillingly stuck to her, hugged her, and kissed her lips. Their lips were pressed tightly against hers. At an intimate distance, their eyelashes were entwined together. Their breaths were connected, and the tips of their noses were touching. The corners of his lips were curved as he kissed her without a second of delay. At first, it was just a light touch, but the more they kissed, the more uncontrollable it became. Chapter 21-25. He immediately smiled along with her. No matter when it was, as long as he saw her smile, no matter how tired or unhappy he was, it would all disappear. Under his gentle attacks, she also learned to be obedient and let him kiss her. In the end, she also learned to take the initiative. She wrapped her hands around his shoulders and hooked them around the back of his neck. She took the initiative to kiss his thin lips and gently traced the shape of his lips. Then she deepened her kiss and entwined her breath with his. Her initiative, however, made him feel incomparably comfortable. Under his many training sessions, her kissing skills had finally improved a little. At least, she was no longer as nervous as a zombie when she hugged and kissed him, not moving at all. At that time, he was displeased that this little woman was so passionate in all the kissing scenes in the movies. But when it came to him, she was like a wooden fish. Now that he thought about it, this was just a little woman's unique shyness. The more she was in front of the person she loved, the more shy she would be. She wouldn't even know where to place her hands. Unlike before, Yin was now like a cute puppy. She gently licked the tip of his tongue, pinched it, and coquettishly rolled it. Then, she dug her way out and bit his lips. She did not use too much strength, though. Instead, she was gentle and careful, as if she was licking a delicious patch. He was aroused by her kiss, and his body temperature gradually rose until it was boiling. The man reached out to take off her clothes. She took a shower for him first. She was wearing a bathrobe, and because she had turned on the floor heating, her two cute little feet were bare. As soon as he did this, she was startled. Yin blushed and said, "Hey, is it okay that the door isn't locked?" Muyaja laughed and said, "It's okay. What's so important about it? What if the two little rascals come looking for me and the door isn't locked? What if they peek? That's good. It'll be good for them to observe." "Hey." Yin was angry and amused at the same time. "I didn't realize that you were so indecent before. They should know what's going on. Since you haven't been there for so long, they should have guessed what's going on. If they know what's good for them, they wouldn't dare to knock on the door." The more Muyaja spoke, the more husky and magnetic his voice became. He pressed the tip of her nose, and his tall body slowly moved closer to her body. The boiling heat in his eyes could no longer be concealed. He untied her clothes. She moaned a few times and actually cooperated. Her two small hands reached over and began to untie the knot he had tied. With a tug, the knot loosened, and the bathrobe slid down from her shoulders to her waist. She grabbed his collar and gently kissed his collarbone all the way down. Finally, she stopped at his chest and buried her little face in his chest. Over there was his scorching heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. It was sonorous and powerful. For some reason, that place was clearly not his sensitive spot, but when she kissed him like this, it actually made his heart feel incomparably soft. A nameless fire immediately rose up, and he really wanted to press her down on the bed, press her under his body, and fiercely take her. However, it was rare to see her take the initiative, so he couldn't bear to disturb her mood. He held it in, and allowed her to please him. The pleasure brought about by skin-to-skin contact was so soothing. He closed his eyes, snorted softly, and hugged her shoulders. Sure. Yin Shu's movements paused, and she looked up at him in a daze. Her eyes were filled with infatuation, and her cheeks were as mesmerizing as if she had put on rouge. Chapter 21-26. That seductive look, from the tip of her eyes to every distinct eyelash, revealed a fatal seduction that could hook one's soul tightly. It caused his heart to stir. The moment he met her gaze, it was as if he had been electrocuted. The electric current instantly struck his waist and traveled along the nerves in his spine to his brain. This was probably the most mysterious charm between a man and a woman. Heaven created men and women at the same time. One was young, one was Een. One was full of heroic spirit, while the other was charming and enchanting. The two bodies fit together perfectly. Every side of them fit perfectly. It was a pure and natural aesthetic. Her voice was extremely like a lazy cat. With just a mule, it made his heart go numb and unbearable. He suddenly smiled and pecked her lips as if it was some kind of praise. With a good mood, he said a rare, sweet sentence. Do you know, right now, you are very charming? Yin Shirshir's heart was alarmed. This man was either usually like an ice block, or when he teased people, it made people's hearts beat like thunder. The two bodies were tightly pressed against each other. Naturally, a kind of fascinating feeling was produced. This kind of feeling was like an intoxicating wine. It was mellow and rich, but it was not strong at all. It made people feel dizzy after taking a sip. Intoxicated and unable to extricate themselves, they still wanted to take more. The man looked at her blushing little face and caught her little hand, slowly guiding her to the next step. After taking off her clothes, it was springtime. The two people were entangled together, sinking into the soft big bed. Muyaja pinched her waist and went deeper, taking her, wanting her. Tonight, he seemed to be especially passionate. He threw away the heavy work of the company and the annoying trifles, wholeheartedly sinking into her without any distractions. Without any distracting thoughts, he was completely focused and immersed in the intoxicating asterisk. Naturally, it was rare for him to be in such a good mood. He was not like before when he attacked the city. Instead, he was extremely gentle and quickly climbed to the clouds of pleasure. They made love with each other until midnight when they stopped. After they were done, he hugged her and covered her with a blanket. Lowering his head, he saw her satisfied little face dyed red. She was nestled in his chest, her pair of jade legs overbearingly and greedily occupying his waist. She was lazy and did not want to move at all. The aftertaste of the deed lasted for a long time. Even each of his fingers slowly relaxed. This reminded him of a pet cat he had raised when he was young. Her current expression was exactly the same as that cat's. When he was young, on his birthday, his mother had given him an American short-hair cat. It was very clingy. Once he sat down, it would walk arrogantly and elegantly to his side, rubbing against him intimately. Then it would jump and nestle in his arms. When his interest was piqued, and he gently stroked it, this little kitten actually spread out its body and turned its belly towards him, allowing him to stroke it. Perhaps it felt satisfied. Its two little paws were constantly stretched out, and its throat made a guloo sound, as if it was enjoying it, as if it was intimate, and it kept snuggling its little head into his embrace. At that time, he was very fond of this cat. After all, it was given to him by his mother, and he had always loved it dearly. That cat had once lived in the softest part of his heart. Chapter 21-27. However, one day, when he returned home, he didn't know which mischievous child in his family had played a prank on him. When he opened the door to his room, he saw the cat cruelly nailed to the windowsill. A very thick metal rod had pierced through its throat. At that time, he was stubborn and proud. Even though he was heartbroken, he didn't shed a single tear. He knew that this must be a prank by some child. Because of jealousy and hatred, the child had nowhere to vent, so he tortured his most beloved pet to death. He didn't cry and buried the cat quietly. It was probably from then on that he swore that he would become the strongest man and never let anyone bully him. Muyaja snapped out of his thoughts and hugged Yin Shirshir even tighter. Yin Shirshir was almost out of breath from his actions. She looked up and saw that his expression was a little strange. She asked uneasily, "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Muyaja said plainly. Yin Shirshir was stunned for a moment. Suddenly, she frowned and said weakly, "You're always like this. You won't tell me what's on your mind when I ask." Muyaja's expression froze. Then, he slowly curved his lips and explained, "You remind me of a pet I had when I was young." "Pet?" Yin sure couldn't help but be surprised. You had a pet? I didn't expect. I thought you didn't have much love for small animals. Muyaja couldn't help but laugh. Am I that cold? You are. At least, it seems like you are. Yin sure gave a very pertinent comment. She smiled and asked, what kind of pet do you have? A dog? A snake? Yin sure's mouth formed an O shape. Snake. Thinking about it carefully, it wasn't surprising. Snakes were cold-blooded animals. Just like the initial impression he gave people, he was cold and heartless. Muyaja immediately said, I'm just scaring you. Compared to dogs, I prefer cats. They're quiet, obedient, and clingy. More importantly, they won't disturb me when I'm in a bad mood. Instead, they'll quietly accompany me. It wasn't that he hadn't raised a puppy before. At first, he liked it very much. But when he was young, he was too thoughtful and always liked to isolate himself in a small space. As for the dog, it seemed to be so enthusiastic that it was a little over the top. It ran around as if it had endless energy all over its body, jumping and jumping, full of vitality. He simply did not have the mental strength to deal with such enthusiasm. Therefore, he was more inclined towards cats. You raised a cat? Yes, my mother gave it to me as a birthday present. I still remember its round head. It was very cute. Muyaja paused and added, I like it very much. What about now? Where's the cat? Yin sure was a little curious. She had never seen him raise any pets. Dead. Dead. Yin sure frowned, and her heart sank. Is it sick? You might not know this, but in a family like the Mu family, even children of a few years old will be influenced by the family's scheming and scheming. Therefore, there will be wars. Muyaja narrowed his eyes and curled his lips. That cat was probably tortured to death by one of the children. Because of his identity as the legitimate son, he had many enemies. Many children saw him as a thorn in their side and a stumbling block. As for him, he didn't have any close peers.